I thought I might go to prison for decades, at the time. And I was like, man, my life is over. And I had a 1-year-old daughter at the time.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I'm going to miss my daughter growing up. And, I just like pretty much let down my family, my, everyone I knew, and I was very, very depressed,
So that was when you were 25.
I was 25 years old, yeah.
I couldn't imagine having my best friend work on something for that long.
Yeah.
Where we got through the shit together.
Yeah.
And then said, hey, you could either take this tiny, tiny fraction of it or nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a sociopath.
Yeah, he's completely a sociopath.
A former arms dealer during the war in Afghanistan, a major weapons contractor for the U.S. Department of Defense. In early 2007, AEY Incorporated secured a nearly $300 million government contract to supply the Afghan army with ammunition and weapons, but got arrested for violating terms of AEY's contract with the U.S. Army. He is now an entrepreneur, inventor, and musician, and the chief executive officer and founder of Singular Sound. David Packouz.
To be honest, I hated working with Ephraim.
Yeah.
He was just a pain in the ass to work with, just in general as a person. So his book called Once a Gun Runner, it's like 90% bullshit and like 10% truth.
Yeah. So many people out there that are trying to figure out what to do to make money.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about e-commerce or social media marketing or content creation, but not really many people are talking about government contracting. What's up, Zen Hard listeners? This episode is sponsored by ZenDrop. ZenDrop has a very special place in my heart, not only because I started the company, but because dropshipping is really a life-changing business for me. You see, I tried tons of things when I first got started, and what I love about dropshipping is that there's always an opportunity to sell a new product to a new person. There's billions of people and millions of products you can sell, and you never need to touch inventory. All you need to do is pick a product, run ads to it, and if people buy it, you make a profit. So if you're interested in getting started in your e-commerce journey, check out zendrop.com and get started today. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Zen Hard podcast. In this episode, I'm interviewing David Packouz. And yes, that's the same David as the movie War Dogs. They made a whole movie about his story, and in this episode, we get to go deep into what actually happened and his perspective on it. From $300 million government contracts to facing jail time and building inventions and a whole bunch of other really interesting things. This episode goes deep, it's fun, it's entertaining, so stay tuned and I hope you enjoy. War Dogs was an incredible movie.
Yeah, thank you.
How many times have you watched it?
Oh man, well, every girl I ever date wants to watch it with me, so so a few times.
So
yeah, well, I can't give a number, right?
Trying to tap into the secrets.
Yeah, now that I put it out there in those terms, but I've seen it a few times. So the interesting thing though was for me was I was involved in the process of making the film.
Oh really?
Not like deeply, like they didn't give me any artistic discretion at all, like zero. They were like, yeah, I mean, they gave me a little bit of money for me to be involved. Not nearly as much as Miles Teller got to pretend to be me, but that's kind of how Hollywood works. So, but they were very clear, you get like zero artistic control over the process, right? So I knew they can make whatever film they wanted. But they wanted me to be involved because they wanted it to feel more authentic. Right. So the screenwriter, the original screenwriter, Stephen Chin, came down to Miami when he first started the project and interviewed me for about a week, and used those interviews. He recorded all the interviews, and he used those as the basis for the first version of the screenplay.
Gotcha.
But then Todd Phillips, the director, got another screenwriter named Jason Smilovic to kind of rewrite the screenplay a whole bunch of times over like the next year.
Is that what they do?
That's what they do. Yeah, they like rewrite it. Like it got rewritten like 10 different times. And what usually happens, it depends on the kind of movie they're trying to make, right?
Yeah.
If they're trying to make like an artistic film, then usually they'll kind of stick to the original version.
Right.
But if they're trying to make like a big blockbuster Hollywood film, then they try to mold it into the Hollywood format.
Right.
Which, is that's why people say, Hollywood films all have a similar structure.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to appeal to the biggest part of the bell curve.
Right.
Right. When they're spending $40-50 million on a movie, they need to know they're going to make that money back, which means they need to have a certain amount of action, certain amount of relationship drama, certain amount of comedy, drama, et cetera.
Yeah, they have a formula.
Exactly. They have a formula. And so it took them about a year to go from the original version that Stephen Chin wrote to the version that they actually made into a movie. And along the way, they would send me different drafts of the script.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see that kind of transformation.
Yeah.
And to see what kind of parts they cut out, what kind of things they added in. So I kind of got like a interesting insight to the Hollywood sausage making process, so to speak.
What is it? How long does it take to read a screenplay?
Well, it's usually they estimate that like a screenplay averages about 1 page per minute of the film.
Okay.
So like a 90-minute film will be 90 pages.
Gotcha. It's just like reading a 90-page book.
Exactly.
So how many pages did you read of this thing before it went out?
I read the whole thing because obviously I was excited and
every time they revised it, you would read it?
Yeah, I'd read. I mean, like if I saw there weren't many changes, I'd skip over certain sections.
Yeah.
But yeah, they usually would make changes to certain parts, or they'd like cut something out, they'd add something in, and it's funny because like there's certain lines from the movie that they cut.
Yeah.
But like that kind of stuck with me. So like I have 5 brothers, right? And so like while I was going through those different versions of the screenplay, like I would like I wasn't allowed to show them to my brothers, but off the record,
off the record,
they saw it, between me, you, and the whole internet. They saw like, versions of the script. I never emailed it to them, so they didn't have a copy, but we read it together, because we were all excited. And like, there's this one part, this one line in the film that they cut from the final version where like Miles is like, "What? We got to go to like Jordan," and Jonah, like where they decide to go to the Triangle of Death thing.
Yeah.
And Jonah goes, he's like, "David, we're international arms dealers." International, like that. Yeah. And so like whenever my brothers and I go like traveling on a trip, we're like, "We're international, bro, international." And like it's so funny because like we quote it as if it happened in the movie, but that scene was cut from the final film. So like we're quoting a version of the movie that never actually happened.
So they didn't say that part of the movie?
They never said that, which I thought was a great line. It was.
I could have seen him say that.
No, it totally made sense. But no, they cut it.
So how did they find your story and decide to make a movie about it?
So the way the whole movie happened was there was, well, to go back a little bit, we got in trouble because the New York Times published a front page article about us. And it was not a flattering article. It had our mugshots on the front page of the New York Times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Next to like a image of like rusty looking ammo. And they said,
that's right.
Yeah, they said it was like we were delivering low quality ammunition and endangering the soldiers in the field, which was untrue.
Yeah.
But it created a big like political stink, and Rolling Stone saw this article, and they were like, I got a call from a journalist from Rolling Stone, a guy named Guy Lawson, and he told me, he's like, this is right up Rolling Stone's alley. My editors keep telling me, write about young people doing fucked up things. That's our target demographic, and you guys really fit the bill. I'm like, oh, thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for that. That's quite the compliment. And I told him, like, I'm a musician. I've always dreamed about being written in Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Just not for this. And he's like, "Oh, we could work your music in there. Don't worry about it."
We'll mention it.
Yeah, he offers the carrot.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Okay, fine." But like I was at the time, we were about to get into some deep legal trouble, and my lawyer told me I can't talk to any journalists. So my lawyer said, "Look, after all the legal jeopardy is done, you can talk to him and do all that." So that took like 3 years. So by the time the Rolling Stone article, so the New York Times article was published in 2008. That was like the end of my arms dealing government contracting
How old were you at
career.
that time?
I was 25 at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So
just a young man.
Yes.
On the cover of New York Times.
On the cover of the New York Times mugshot. It was not a flattering picture. Yeah, it was not a flattering picture. I looked like a criminal. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was not good, and I thought I was going to go to prison for years at the time.
God.
Yeah, it was quite a stressful time in my life.
How long did the arms dealing go for in your life?
So I started in late 2005 and ended in like early-ish 2008.
So you started in your early 20s.
Yeah, I was like 22 when I started.
We're all stupid in our early 20s, except if you're listening in your early 20s.
Yeah,
I'm not calling you stupid.
You're very smart to listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
You'll get slightly smarter.
I made a lot of stupid choices in my early 20s.
like sure.
I used to throw the world's largest foam party. That was like my first business.
Doesn't sound so stupid to me.
You know, but I raised money from some trust fund kid, and then I couldn't pay him back, so I got sued.
Ooh,
and I felt like the worst guy in the world. But I can't even imagine what you felt like being, facing prison time and being on like, what was that? What was that like?
It was harsh. I thought I might go to prison for decades, at the time, and I was like, man, my life is over. And I had a 1-year-old daughter at the time.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I'm going to miss my daughter growing up. And, I just like pretty much let down my family, my, everyone I knew, and it was real. I was very, very depressed,
So that was when you were 25.
I was 25 years old. Yeah. And
how long were you in that state where you're like, I think I'm going to be, my life is ruined?
So it was really bad for a few months, just like until, kind of saw the lay of the land of how things were going to go. But it was still like sitting on edge because after a few months, they like offered me a plea deal, right? So at first they were like, oh, we're going to charge you and you might go to prison for like 300 years.
My God.
Yeah, because the way they charge it, we had like 71 aircraft loads that went into Afghanistan with the ammo that we were lying about.
Yeah.
And they said each aircraft, we supplied a document called a certificate of conformance where we told the government what kind of ammo is there and how much and where it came from, where it was manufactured. And we put Albania and it was really China. And so they're like, each document that you submitted to the government is an act of fraud. And you can get up to 5 years for each one. And that's 71 acts, so 355 years.
Oh my God.
So I was like, my life is over, I'm fucked. And but then they were like, okay, but if you plead guilty, we'll combine it into one.
Yeah.
And so you can get is 5 years, and because you plead guilty, we'll tell the judge to give you on the low end of the guidelines. So maybe you'll get a year, maybe you'll get just probation. It's up to the judge.
That's still horrible, but compared to your whole life, it's probably was it a relief to get that news?
Absolutely. I mean, I was like, okay, I'll plead guilty, and the most I can do is 5 years in a worst case scenario, and most likely no more than a year if things, if I play my cards right. And that was an enormous relief. But I was still sitting on the edge of my seat because like I had no idea, because the judge could be having a bad day and they'll be like, oh yeah, the prosecutor is saying to give you on the low end, but you deserve the high end, so I'm going to give you the high end, and then you have to do 5 years, and it's really up to the judge, and the judge is a human being, and they might be having a bad day that day.
Your fate is in
and
someone else's hands.
Completely.
That is scary.
Yeah, and I was waiting for 3 years to get sentenced. So for like 3 years, I was on the edge of my seat, not knowing what was going to happen.
What were you doing during those 3 years?
So I was trying to be as good of a citizen as possible. My lawyer told me, he's like, you have to make yourself look good to the judge. Yeah. That's your number one job right now.
Right.
And so I went back to school. Before I got into the arms dealing business, I was studying chemistry.
Yeah.
And I quit like halfway through the bachelor's degree to go into the arms dealing biz. And so when I went back to school, I just decided I was kind of tired of chemistry. I decided to go into mechanical engineering. So I started doing mechanical engineering. And I wasn't allowed to do government contracting or, the arms dealing business.
Yeah.
And government contracting is the more broad version of what we were doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of different government. There's tons of things.
It's pretty much selling stuff to the government.
Yeah.
And we were selling mostly weapons and ammunition, but you can sell anything to the government.
Even services.
Yeah. Services. My first government contract was for 40,000 gallons of propane.
Okay.
And it went to the Air Force Base in Wyoming. We worked on food contracts, on vehicle contracts. My current partners in War Dogs Academy, there's one of the businesses I have now where we teach people how to do government contracting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they specialize in laundry services. And they have a $9 million contract to supply laundry services to the U.S. Army in Germany.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're killing it. And so one of our students in War Dogs Academy got a contract to supply hypnotherapy services to the U.S. Army, like to work with like the PTSD and stuff.
Wow.
So they literally buy everything. Everything.
Do you think does that go away with this new Department of Government Efficiency?
Some things may get reduced. They're trying to cut whole departments. We'll see if that lasts.
Yeah.
But because I think you need an act of Congress for some of that, but we'll see. Who knows? it seems like they're cutting first and asking questions later. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But the government to function, they need to buy things.
Yeah, they need
you know.
things.
So if you want to have a government of any size, you know, then you're going to have government contracting. There's no other way for the government to function.
How did you discover government contracting at such a young age?
Yeah, so I discovered it, well, through my friend, former friend, I should say, Ephraim DeVeroli, who in the movie is played by Jonah Hill.
By the way, is he still incarcerated?
No, he ended up serving 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
But he got out. He's been out for a while. He
guys
lives
aren't-
in Miami. No, we're not friends.
Not friends.
Yeah,
Do you ever
he's-
see each other?
The last time I saw him was in a deposition when I was suing him.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
Okay.
we're not friends.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not friends.
Arch
Yeah.
nemesis.
Yeah. He still owes me $5 million. So, you know, when he pays me that, we could be friends again.
Shake hands,
Yeah,
move on.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. If he ever pays me that, which he won't.
So were you guys like in school together?
So we knew each other from synagogue, actually. We're both Jewish.
Yeah.
And cue the anti-Semitic comments on YouTube. I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah. Sad.
Unfortunately.
Very
But
unfortunate.
it is what it is. So I actually like it when anti-Semites comment on my YouTube videos.
Really?
Because then it helps the algorithm, you know? So
Ah,
the more
I didn't know that.
YouTube feeds off of outrage. So if people are outraged, so go ahead, anti-Semites.
I'm Jewish too.
Yeah, so there we go.
Oh, welcome the comments.
Oh, there we go.
If we're gonna get more views.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you should embrace the hate. You know, it's good for the algorithm, unfortunately.
Well, I'm
Or
sure
fortunately.
any
Yeah.
hate you get now is
Yeah.
trumps in comparison to the pain you suffered from being on the New York Times.
Oh
and,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and-
No, it doesn't really bother me.
Yeah.
It's fine. I kind of just laugh it off.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, people think I'm like part of the elders of Zion. You know, the protocols. Of the you know, I'm part of the Illuminati. To me, it's kind of a compliment. It means people think I'm important.
Yeah.
You know, that I'm like involved in like you know secret going-ons at the world stage. But yeah, and so it's fine. But yeah, so we were saying we met in synagogue. We both of our parents were very religious, Orthodox Jews.
Yeah.
We grew up Orthodox, and but neither of us liked to pray.
Yeah.
So we would kind of sneak out of synagogue and go hang out outside, and that's kind of how we met. And so he got kicked out of. We went to Orthodox Jewish schools, but different ones, not the same one. And they're very strict, right?
Yeah.
So he got caught smoking weed, and so he got kicked out of school. And when he was 16, and his parents said, "Oh, you know, if you're not taking the rules seriously, you're gonna learn what life is about. You're gonna join the workforce."
Yeah.
So they sent him off to work for his uncle, who owns a big pawn shop in LA. And one of the things pawn shops sell in America is guns.
Right.
And he became like a gun nut. He became, you know, teenage boys get obsessed with guns, sports, music, you know, certain things, you know, that kind of really becomes your identity as a teenage boy.
Yeah.
So he became a gun guy, and he got obsessed with the guns, even though he was 16.
Yeah.
And he started selling the guns to the customers in the store, and his uncle noticed he was pretty good at this. And so he and his uncle was bidding on, you know, the local cops would come in and buy things, and they told the uncle, "Oh, you should, you know, go through the government contracting system so you could sell to the whole department instead of just selling to, you know, a couple guys here and there in the department." So his uncle started bidding on government contracts to sell, you know, like firearms and small arms ammo, bulletproof vests, boots, you know, various accessories to the local and state police. And so he learned how to do government contracting from his uncle. His uncle put him on the job to fill out all the paperwork and do these government contracting bids. And so he learned how to do that. He worked for his uncle for about 2 years. And then his uncle claims that he stole like $70K from him. He claims that his uncle stole $70K from him. They're both well-known scumbags in the industry. So, you know, I believe them both. Yeah. And so he quit, and he came back to Miami, and he took over a company that his dad wasn't using called AEY Inc.
Okay.
And in the movie, there's the famous scene. Jonah Hill is asked, "Oh, what does AEY stand for?" And he's like, "Oh, you mean like morally?" And he's like, "No, like what do the letters stand for?" "No, it stands for nothing. Like IBM stands for nothing." And the guy's like, "Oh, it stands for International Business Machines." He's like, "Get the fuck out of here," you know. So there's that scene in the movie. And actually, AEY does stand for something. It's so that's one of the things they changed in the film because it was funnier
What does it
that
stand
way.
for?
It stands for the initials of his dad's 3 sons.
Oh, okay.
So the E in AEY is Ephraim.
Gotcha.
So it stands for Avrami, Ephraim, Yeshaya. It's the three names.
And it was just a holding company that they weren't.
It was just a
using, or-
holding company. He originally started it as I think a label printing business, and he just never did much with it. So it was just kind of like mothballed.
Yeah.
And so Ephraim took it over, registered it with the federal government, so he'd be eligible to bid on government contracts. And this was in early 2005, late 2004 when he started by himself, and he was still 17. That's why he was doing everything under his dad's name, his dad's company's name. And this was right after the invasion of Iraq.
Right.
And the Bush administration pretty much destroyed Iraq, and then they were trying to build up the country and turn it into a democracy. That was the idea.
Right.
They did the same thing with Afghanistan.
Right.
So part of that nation building process was they had to spend a lot of money to build this nation. So the way they spent money is through the government contracting system. So there was literally trillions of dollars getting put in. I think they spent about $1 or $2 trillion on the entire on the Iraq-Afghanistan combo.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's some of our national debt. That's where it went.
Wow.
And so Ephraim started bidding on all, because he already knew the gun business from working for his uncle. So they were trying to build up the Afghan and Iraqi National Army and police forces, and they need guns and ammo and bulletproof vests and uniforms and boots and all that stuff. And so he started bidding on all these contracts, and he started winning a bunch of these contracts, started doing really well. And then after about a year of working by himself, we bumped into each other at like a mutual friend's house. And he asked me what I was doing. At the time, I was in college studying chemistry.
Yeah.
I also had a few side businesses. I was working as a professional massage therapist. That part of
That's
the movie.
true.
That is true. It was very part-time thing. I had done it before I'd started my part-time businesses that were making me more money at the time. But I noticed that girls like massage therapists. So
why not?
It helped.
Great perk.
Exactly. So it didn't hurt in that department. But I also started a business importing SD cards from China and selling them on eBay. I was importing bed sheets and towels from Pakistan and selling them to nursing homes. That part is true too, though not in the way they portray it in the movie.
Okay.
In the movie, like I'm going to this guy's nursing home and like begging him to buy my towels, and he's turning me down.
Well, big cinema. They have to make it entertaining.
They have to have it a better arc. So in real life, I actually never even took delivery of the I was just a broker. And I was doing containers. I wasn't filling my apartment up with boxes.
Better for the movies.
Yeah, it was better in the movie. Yeah. So I was doing these businesses and doing pretty well. I had at the time I had saved up about $100K. That I had made in the past year. Yeah. So I thought I was pretty hot shit. I was like, I'm 22 years old. I have $100,000 in the bank. I have way more than any of my friends who are all flipping burgers, and working as waiters. So I was like, I'm pretty good at this business. And so then I meet him and he asked me what I'm doing, and I tell him, doing the SD cards, the bed sheets, etc. And he's like, oh, that's the stuff you're doing is a lot of the things you're doing is similar to what I do in my business, finding suppliers overseas, arranging logistics, figuring out the financing, import, licensing, all that stuff. He's like, but I bet I'm making way more money than you. Yeah. So you should come and work with me. I need a partner, a smart guy I can trust. Yeah. We would make so much more money together than you're making on your own. And I'm like, well, are you sure about that? I mean, how much money have you made? I thought I was pretty hot.
Doing well.
Yeah, I thought I was doing pretty good. Yeah. And so he's like, okay, I'll tell you. I'm gonna tell you, but only to inspire you. I'm not bragging. Yeah. Okay. And he opens up his laptop and he's like, he logs into his Bank of America account. And he shows me, and he has $1.8 million in cash in his bank account, in his checking account, his business checking account. And I'm like, holy shit. Wow. I thought I was pretty hot for having $100K. Right. And he's like, I made this in the last year. Wow. And I'm like, whoa, this guy knows something I don't know. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm in. Teach me what you know.
Yeah, please.
And that's how I got into it.
Wow. Yeah. So he brought you in because you were smart. You could bring some value to him. Exactly. He needed a partner. Yeah. What was the first thing you guys did together?
So the idea originally was that I wouldn't work on arms dealing contracts. Yeah.
Other government contracts?
Yeah. So the idea was that I would work on fuel contracts. Right?
Oh yeah, that's what you said. That was your first deal.
That was the first deal I actually got.
Yeah.
Because the reason I picked fuel was because it's a consumable good, right? So they're constantly buying more of it. It's never going to end, right?
Yeah. Well, on that notion though, like there's probably tons of people that can supply fuel. Like,
correct.
Is it the lowest bidder that gets the deal, or how does that work?
So the way government contracting works is it's a combination of factors. It really depends on the size of the contract, which is affects which things they take into account, right? So if it's a contract these days, the number is under 250K. That's considered a small contract for the government. So you don't need any past performance history. You could be a brand new newbie to the game and you could win a $250,000 contract.
That's 250K in like top line revenue. Like
that's top line revenue.
Gotcha.
Whatever your profit margin is, whatever you manage to squeeze out of your suppliers and situation of how you bid the contract. And the profit margins can vary widely. Like for big contracts, it's usually on the low end, like 10% or lower.
Yeah.
But for small contracts, I've seen people make like 40-50% margins.
Wow.
Yeah. But you really need to know the industry really well in order to know that you're going to still win the contract with those margins.
Yeah.
So when you're first starting out and you don't know the industry that you're bidding on well, usually you'll be pretty conservative. You'll just put on like 10% and hope to win a contract. So you build up past performance. Once you have a bit of past performance under your belt, some contracts that you've delivered successfully on, now you're eligible for the bigger contracts.
Gotcha.
Yeah, otherwise, above 250K, they require you to prove that you can do this business.
Right.
And that you have some history doing the business.
So how is it not, and I want to go back to the story, but I'm just curious, how is it not just a race to the bottom on all these contracts? Like, for example, in my business, we do fulfillment for drop shippers.
Yeah.
And people come to us, they ask for a quote. We give them a quote. They got a cheaper quote somewhere else. They come back to us, we come lower.
Yeah.
We're able to win because we actually own our supply chain and we can usually beat people. But
So
in
you
this,
have a competitive
it's
advantage.
mostly brokers, right?
Yeah. So there's a combination of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brokers. There's also businesses, end suppliers, so to speak, who also bid on contracts. But the end suppliers aren't always the most competitive, right? So like take ammunition, for example, right? Manufacturers have certain fixed costs, right? They have to pay for the copper, they have to pay for the gunpowder, they have to pay for the labor, the electricity, and those things fluctuate with time, right? Now, so when they're bidding on an ammo contract and they're selling to the government, there's only so far they can go, as far as being competitive.
Yeah, I'm creating new ammo.
Exactly, when you're creating new ammo.
Right.
Now, if you're a broker and you find, this police department has had this ammo sitting in their warehouse for 10 years, and it's kind of coming to the point where they don't really they need to use it or lose it.
Yeah, you can negotiate better.
You can
deals,
negotiate.
Liquidate it.
Yeah, the liquidation opportunities are large, right? And the same thing goes with food, with clothes that are out of fashion. So there's a lot of industries that a broker can beat the manufacturer.
Because you could find the deal. It's all about finding the deal.
It's all about finding the deal.
But fuel has a price.
Yeah. So fuel tends to move with the markets.
Yeah.
Right. Now you would be surprised that a lot of large companies, they aren't even registered to do business with the government.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
You'd be surprised.
It's a big business to do.
You would think so. Because it's a pain in the ass.
Gotcha.
Right? So there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of regulations. There's a learning curve when you first start doing it. The government pays you net 30, which a lot of businesses don't like.
And I heard, I have a friend who lives in my neighborhood who does government contracting for accounting services, and they can go back and audit him 3 years later on things that have been done for years. Yeah.
So there are issues like that. I haven't heard of anything like that happening too egregiously. I'm sure it can happen. But yeah, you really need to dot your I's and cross your T's with government contracting. You could get in trouble. It's a lot more bureaucracy than the private sector.
Gotcha.
And you need more financing. So a lot of companies, they don't want to deal with it.
It's just not worth it for them.
Yeah, it's not worth it. They already have enough demand in the private sector that they don't want to deal with the hassles of the government sector. So actually, one of the services that we provide at War Dogs Academy, that we can get to later, is we offer a complete end-to-end service for companies.
Oh, wow.
So we have a course to teach entrepreneurs who want to do things on their own.
Yeah.
But for obviously a higher price, we have like an in-house team that will do this B2B service for companies. We've already had quite a few companies use these services.
Yeah.
And it makes sense for them because yes, it's more money up front, but they don't have the learning curve. So they don't have to waste all those months of learning and setting things up and making mistakes and learning the hard way. And they just hit the ground running. There's oftentimes companies come to us when they see a government opportunity that has a hard deadline in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, they need help.
And they're like, we don't have time to learn this shit.
Yeah.
You guys do this for us. And through that process, we'll train our staff to do the next one.
So are they all like, and I'll get back to the story in a second, but like, you mentioned an example of like hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
Are all of them listed as an opportunity, or like, was that like something the government said, hey, we're looking for this?
Yes.
Okay.
So by law, the vast majority of contracts, they have to post on sam.gov,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
sam.gov.
Yeah.
And except for like the CIA's black budget, that they keep secret.
Yeah.
They don't tell you what they're spending those like 50 billion or whatever it is that they're
just
spending.
get lost somewhere.
It's probably because it goes into cash to people we don't want to be seeing paying cash to,
Yeah.
So the CIA has its own, discretionary black budget.
Yeah.
But most of the government has to publish publicly what they are buying, and it has to be open market competition.
But they have to say, so someone in the government said, hey, we want hypnotherapy for.
Correct.
Okay. And then someone's able to go and say, oh, I could do that.
Yes,
Gotcha.
exactly. So there probably, I don't know the details of that particular contract, but if I had to guess, is maybe like the VA, right? They provide medical services to veterans.
Yeah.
Some like doctor is like, it would be really helpful with this PTSD is, I've seen in the literature that hypnotherapy can help to a certain extent in these kind of situations.
Right.
So, and we'll end up saving money rather than putting them on drugs.
Right.
They'll be like, okay, well, that makes sense to use hypnotherapy services for these particular cases. And they'll be like, in order to get those, we have to go through the contracting officer who will bid it out and see, and that's how those hypnotherapy contracts get there.
Gotcha.
And it's like that for everything. It's like that for fuel. It's like that for weapons. It's like that for fighter jets.
So your first deal was the fuel.
Yes.
How did that come to be?
So I knew nothing about fuel. I'd never done a fuel contract. I didn't know how the system worked. Apparently there are these distributors for propane, right? This was a propane contract. And there are these regional distributors. And I was looking for something to be delivered to Wyoming, to an Air Force base.
Yeah.
And you have to quote a delivered price. Mm-hmm. So I had to not only find the source of supply, I also had to find the logistics, the transportation.
Yeah.
And it was that combination, which, you can find a real good source, but bad logistics price, and, you're not going to be competitive. So I was looking in the region, and I just did a Google search, right, for all the propane distributors, started calling them all up, started getting prices. Some of them refused to give me, they're like, oh yeah, we're bidding on that contract too. I'm not going to give you a price.
Yeah.
But a bunch of them were like, yeah, no problem.
Right.
They weren't bidding on the contract or were unaware of it or something. And then I got prices from fuel transportation companies, built up a spreadsheet, and did the best combination and found a pretty good competitive price. Filled out all the paperwork. Then Ephraim got on the phone with my suppliers, and I'll give him credit, he was an amazing negotiator.
Yeah.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
So good he negotiated me out of all the money he owed me. So didn't negotiate that. But he was a very talented negotiator.
Yeah.
Pain in the ass to do business with, partially because he's such a good negotiator.
Right.
But he negotiated them down to their last rock bottom using every trick in the book. And we won the contract, and we were splitting the money 50-50 for these contracts, because I would do pretty much all the work and he would come at the last second, do the negotiations and make sure I filled out all the government paperwork correctly and do everything under his company's name.
Yep.
So that was our deal, is we were splitting things 50-50. And so after all was said and done, we each made about $8,000.
Okay,
for
on the
about
first contract.
For like 3 weeks of work.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was pretty happy.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a good start.
Yeah.
And, this was obviously a zero past performance kind of contract, and then we could go for other ones. So that was my first contract.
Yeah.
And then I started working on some other fuel contracts, but then he came to me and he's like, hey, I won this contract for like rare gun parts. And he's like, and I won the contract. I know it's going to be profitable, but I don't have time to work on it. So why don't you work on delivering this contract and we'll split it 50-50 because most of the work is in the delivery. Because he knew the industry well enough that he bid it he knew that this particular contract, no one was going to bid on it because it was 130 different gun parts for gun systems that were not being manufactured anymore. They were like all antiques.
Right.
And this was going to the special forces who need these kind of systems to train the operatives in the field, because when you're a special forces guy in whatever place or around the world, you don't know what kind of gun system you're gonna encounter, and you need to know how to use like a Luger from World War II or communist era stuff. So they train them on all these things.
Right.
So Ephraim knew that this was such a pain in the end, and they wanted like 3 units of each part. Low quantity, high amount of different types. So it was going to be a big pain in the butt. Now there is a publication of all the federal firearms licenses holders, right? And so you can download that spreadsheet. It's like 70,000 businesses, with their phone numbers and emails, and a lot of them don't have emails listed. But he's like, here's the spreadsheet, 70,000 businesses. Start calling all of them. He's like, that's why he didn't want to do it. And start getting prices from all of them for all these different gun parts. And so it was a long slog, very tedious. But it took me a few months to fulfill that contract. But we had very high margins because we were like tripling our money on some of these parts because, and he bid it at a very high price. And these gun dealers were thrilled to get rid of these parts that have been collecting dust, for who knows how many decades. So they were happy to sell it at a low price. And so that was my first entry into the gun industry.
How big was that contract?
I ended up making about, I think we each made in the low 20s. So it was about like 21, 22.
Gotcha.
So and that took me like a couple months to finish. So I was like getting my feet wet, and then I worked on a bunch of contracts that I lost because it's very common when you're. I tell all our students at Wardhouse Academy, this is a casino, right? Now it's not a casino where it's completely money up to chance. You're not paying. Well, you're paying with your time,
with your time,
and your effort, right? Now it's not completely up to chance. If you actually know an industry well, you can know how competitive you are, and the more the more experience you have, the higher your odds go. But it is a casino in the sense that no matter how much work you put in, there's always a chance you're going to lose because you don't know what your competitors are bidding it at, right? It's illegal for the government to tell you what your competitors are bidding it at, obviously, because then
it's all the way raised to the bottom.
Exactly. And then you would know what price you need to come in at.
Right.
And you can beat your competitors that way. So the government wants everyone to give their true lowest price.
Right.
And that's why it's illegal for them to tell you, what the bid prices are. So I bid on a bunch of I bid on contracts for like SUVs going to the State Department in Pakistan. I lost that. I bid on for like MREs, meals ready to eat for the Army. I lost that. And like each of these contracts took me like a few weeks of work because they were large contracts I was going for, and it was very disheartening,
I could imagine.
It was very disheartening. But I knew it was like just part of the business.
Yeah.
And then after a few of those, Ephraim saw the contract for the Afghan army. That was what got into the movie and kind of made us infamous.
Yeah.
And so I started working on that. So within about 8 months of starting, I started working on the Afghan contract. So it was relatively early, in my career as a government contractor that I started working on the Afghan contract.
So was that one contract in Afghan? Or
so that was a single contract. Ephraim had won already a bunch of much smaller contracts to Iraq for similar types of equipment, for similar munitions.
And when you say smaller, like what were some of the bigger ones at that time?
So his biggest contract that he had ever won, I think was about $14 million.
Wow.
So yeah, and that was from munitions to Iraq.
Were you involved with those?
No, I wasn't. He had won that before I started working with him.
Gotcha.
He was delivering them. It was like a piece by piece delivery. It wasn't like all at once.
Yeah.
Right. So he was in the middle of delivering when I was starting to
Right.
work with him. So he had already had the past performance for these types of items. You know, he
Gotcha.
had lots of past performance.
Right.
Right. So his company was eligible to bid on the highest possible level for contracts of like Warsaw Pact munitions, right? The former Soviet Republic format of munitions, right? For the AK-47,
Right.
et cetera. So he knew when he saw this solicitation come out for the Afghan contract, he knew that he was eligible to bid on it.
Yeah.
Even though the contract was enormous.
Yeah.
Like he'd never seen numbers like this.
Well, how big was it?
So it was, I think it was about 130 million AK-47 rounds.
Wow.
It was about like, I think 30 or 40 light machine gun rounds, 1.1 million grenades, about 30,000 anti-aircraft rockets,
Wow.
70,000 like mortars. It was enormous.
All in
like,
one contract?
All in one contract.
Wow.
So in Iraq, what they had done is they had split the needs, I guess, what they needed into a bunch of small contracts, and they kind of give a little piece to this company, a
Yeah.
little piece to that company, and it became a logistical nightmare for
Right.
them. You know, it became a big clusterfuck.
Right.
And so they decided for Afghanistan, they were like, you know what, we don't want to deal with all like 50 different companies. We're going to just do one company. They take care of everything. We have one point of contact. That's why it was so big.
Gotcha.
Because they decided not to split it up because they had a bad experience in Iraq. So they decided to put this all into one contract, and Ephraim knew that we were eligible to bid on it.
Yeah.
And so he was like, we have the past performance, we have the connections, we got to go for this. He says, he's like, okay, forget all the other stuff you're working on. You're working
doing
on
this
this
one.
100% of the time. And he told me, he's like, I know we were working 50-50, but it's only fair because this is my bread and butter. I already have a bunch of good connections. You're kind of filling in the gaps. We'll do 75-25. And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't
huge.
care. Yeah, it's huge. I'm going to cry all the way to the bank. You know, it's not going to be.
Well, and you guys were sourcing
Yeah.
anti-aircraft missile. Like, how do you even have those kind of connections?
Yeah.
Like, where do you get
So
those?
yeah, it kind of blew my mind too. It's like, where do you would be surprised that the defense industry is very similar to pretty much every other industry.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't need like a license to buy
You
that?
do.
Okay.
So that's the one difference, is that you need licensing, right? Now it's not that hard to get it.
Yeah.
Right. You just need to apply, and so depending on the kind of business you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So for international business, right, if you're trying to sell from, Albania to Iraq or Afghanistan, right? If you're not going through the federal government, you need a State Department broker's license.
Yep.
Right. And you need to apply to the State Department for every single deal. Once you have the license, that allows you to apply for individual deal licenses. Right.
Gotcha.
So you need to do that. And for like, if you're importing these kind of materials into the United States, let's say you're importing ammunition into the U.S., let's say to sell to the shooting sports market, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States, you need a federal firearms license.
Gotcha.
Right? Specifically an importer's license. And for that, they will, you need to, it takes a few months to get these licenses.
Yeah.
You need to register your fingerprints with the FBI. You need to have a office, like a commercial office with a gun safe. They send an agent to go and inspect your office.
Right.
So there is a process.
Yeah.
But it's you're not going to get a federal firearms license if you're a convicted felon. So I can't get one anymore.
Yeah.
Right. But as long as you meet the basic criteria and you do the applications and you do them in time, it takes a few months, but you can get the licenses. So Ephraim, at the time, he was, I think he was 20 years old at this time. And so he had these licenses.
Yeah.
Right. I think he might have got the federal firearms license under his dad's name. I don't remember whether you have to be 18 or 21. But then, like, before we won the Afghan contract, he had turned 21.
Gotcha.
So he transferred everything to his.
How long did it take to win that contract?
So we started working on it in August of 2006. And we worked on it for like good like 2-3 months.
Yeah.
Until we submitted the offer, and then we didn't hear back from them for like another 2 months, and we thought, oh, we for sure lost it.
Yeah.
And then they contacted us right before the end of the year, and they were like, okay, we need to do like 5 different audits on your company. And they do audits on your company if you're in the final running.
Yeah.
Right. So we're like, holy shit, they're actually thinking about giving this contract.
And how big was it at that time? The contract?
So we were by far the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
And we came in just under 300 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what the next one was? Like, how do you know?
Yeah, we do know. And I know because I was informed illegally by one of the contracting officers. It was a few months, like a month after we won the contract, I was talking to one of the contracting officers on the phone, and they kind of do this scene in the movie where they tell us.
Yeah.
And Jonah gets super mad.
Yeah.
And so that is based on a real occurrence.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen the way they show it in the movie. In real life, it was over the phone.
Gotcha.
Because it was illegal for him to tell me. He wasn't going to say it in front of all his colleagues, yeah. like they show in the movie.
Yeah.
So he actually told me, I was talking to him over the phone because, so what was happening the reason he told me this was because at the time we were having trouble getting overflight permits. So when you're transporting military goods, you need to get a license. It's called an overflight permit from every country that you fly your goods over, even if you don't land there. You have to. So if you're flying over, Greece, you need to get from the Greek government permission to fly your aircraft with all the ammo and stuff over their airspace. So I think there were like, I forgot the exact number, but like something like 12 countries between like Albania and Afghanistan that we had to fly over. And so we had to get licenses from every single one. And some of them were not giving us the licenses. They were like just being,
that sounds like such a pain.
It was quite
reaching
a
out
pain.
to foreign governments and trying to get licenses.
It was a big pain.
Yeah.
And so the contracting officers, the U.S. contracting officers were kind of hounding us to get the goods delivered because Afghanistan has a fighting season, right? Because during the winter nobody fights because the mountain passes are all filled up with snow. So when the spring comes and all the snow melts, then they all start fighting again.
Yeah.
So it was like getting March, April time. So the snow was melting and our Afghan allies were starting to run out of ammo.
Wow.
And they're like, hey guys, when are you going to deliver? We need the ammo,
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, we haven't gotten all the overflight permits yet.
Yeah. What would happen if you just flew over?
Well, the aircraft wouldn't do it. Like we hire a logistics company because
and they can't get those licenses. You have to do it.
We have to. Well, they try to.
Yeah.
And when they don't get it, they say, hey, we didn't get it for this, and this country. Can you help us out?
Gotcha.
That's how that works. And if we had flown an aircraft without the licensing over someone's airspace, they could, in theory, scramble their fighter jets and force you down and confiscate your cargo and the aircraft. Which is why no aircraft company is going to fly their aircraft without all the proper licensing because they don't want to risk losing their plane.
Right.
So I was telling the contracting officer was on the phone, like getting very antsy about our delivery schedule. And I told him, hey, we're having trouble with these overflight permits. And he's like, oh, maybe I could help you out with that. He's like, we'll get the defense attaché in our embassies to talk to their counterparts in the government and see what's going on. And he's like, because we really want to help you guys out. You guys were just so competitive. And I said, really? How competitive?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm not really supposed to tell you this, but between you and me, you guys came in 52 million under the nearest competition. I'm like, holy shit, 52 million. And he's like, yeah, but don't tell anyone I told you that. Right? Of course, I hang up the phone and tell Ephraim, and he was furious. He's like, fuck, motherfuckers, we could have made another 50 mil.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Maybe they gave us the contract because we were so much lower.
Right.
So of course, in Ephraim's mind, we could have come in $1 under the next guys, and they would have given us the contract.
Which may not.
Yeah, it may not have happened.
What
There's
was
no
your
way
projected
to know.
margin on the contract at that point?
We bid the contract at a 9% margin because Ephraim was like, everyone's probably bidding 10%. We got to undercut them at 9%. Yeah, but then Ephraim, as I said, he was a very good negotiator. So once we won the contract, he called up all our sources and said, hey guys, I got a better price over here. You guys want to revise your bid, and did that whole game, as you have experience with. and he played them off against each other, and we ended up having an average of a 20% margin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
We were set to make about 60 million from it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did that feel like when?
Man, I thought I was set for life. That's what I thought. I was like, you know, I had my whole future planned out. You know, I was planning on finishing this Afghan, because to be honest, I hated working with Ephraim.
Yeah.
He was just a pain in the ass
Right.
to work with, just in general as
You're
a
just
person.
done with it.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm gonna do this Afghan contract. I'm gonna make I was set to make 15 million.
Yeah.
I'm like that. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need to stress myself out. You know,
Yeah.
after that. I'm gonna go and finance, my own music career. I'll go
Yeah.
become a rock star.
Yeah.
You know,
There
that
you
was
go.
my plan.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm a musician, I'm a singer-songwriter. If
Yeah.
anyone's curious, you can check out my music on Spotify. You can
Yeah.
just search my name. So I was like, you know, with 15 mil, I'm pretty set. I could spend $1 million on marketing and
Yeah.
give myself a good shot at being like, a
Yeah.
pretty big,
Sound like a
you
good
know.
plan. How confident
yeah.
were you that you guys were going to actually execute on this thing now?
I was nervous.
Yeah.
You know, I was definitely nervous because there were just so many moving parts,
Yeah.
and there was just a lot of things going on at the time. So, like, one thing that we were dealing with right in the beginning was right after we won the contract, oil prices spiked.
Ah.
So, and we had bid the contract all air freight delivery, right? Which is like 80% of the cost is oil, right? The fuel,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so when oil prices spiked, air freight prices spiked.
Yeah.
And now a responsible established company like General Dynamics, one of the people we were competing against, you know, one of these Fortune 500 companies that we beat for the contract, when they bid on something like this, they use a oil hedge.
Right.
Right. You know, so that if the oil prices go up, that, you know, like their kind of insurance pays out and they're not
Yeah.
in a bad situation. Ephraim didn't roll like that,
Right.
right? He didn't like buying insurance because that cut into his margins.
Right.
So he was like, yeah, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. We were not fine, you know, and the oil went up so high that we were going to lose money on this contract.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
how much of the whole value
It
was
really
in
spiked.
transportation?
Yeah, because, okay, so I'll give you the numbers. We were paying, at the time, about 4 cents a round to the Albanians, and we were paying 5 cents a round for transportation.
Oh, wow.
And we were selling it to the government for 10.5 cents a round. So we're making a penny and a half per round.
Right.
But like 5 cents out of that was
Yeah,
transportation.
fuel goes up 20%. You're in the
We're
the red.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're already in the red.
Wow.
You know? So we were like, holy shit, we can't deliver.
What do you do?
You know,
Yeah.
we can't, you know. Now we could still deliver. So there were 30 different items on the contract. Only like 2 of them were like high volume, low value,
Right.
like the AK-47 ammo.
Right.
Right. The other stuff was like grenades, which, you know, the amount, the fraction, like a grenade is $25 a grenade.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're paying maybe like, you know, 20 cents in shipping. So,
Yeah, right.
you know, so there was
Yeah,
way
doesn't really make a difference on that.
enough margin for
Yeah.
that. So we could deliver 80 to 90% of the value of the contract profitably.
Right.
But from the Army's perspective, you better deliver all of it.
Yeah.
Because they don't, you know, they need to supply their,
What
the
happens
soldiers.
if you don't?
So it depends. If you don't deliver successfully, they can cancel your contract for cause, they call it.
Yeah.
And that is a big black mark on your record. And in all future contracts that you're bidding on, it has the potential to interfere with you winning more contracts. It's not a guarantee that you won't win
Yeah.
any contracts, but any contracting officer that is doing their due diligence is going to look into the contractor, or at least they should be. They don't always,
Yeah.
but they should be. And, you know, it may give them second thoughts if they see a series of contracts that were canceled.
Right.
So we were scrambling at the time. We were like, shit, we're gonna be fucked. You know, we're not gonna be able to deliver. You know, they're gonna cancel our contract. We're gonna be screwed. And we were looking for all different ways. We were looking for alternative transportation methods. Maybe we'll do like this, you know, we'll deliver to Pakistan by ship and then try to do it by truck into Afghanistan. But then everyone told us that's a terrible idea because, you know, the route between Karachi and Kabul is like controlled by a bunch of warlords
Yeah.
who would love nothing more than a large
Steal.
caravan of
Yeah.
ammunition coming through their territory
Yeah,
that they
yeah,
can
yeah.
take. They would love that. And so we were like, okay, we also tried to go by train through Russia, but Russia, we weren't on good terms with Russia at the time.
Yeah.
They had just supplied the Iranians some nuclear technology and got themselves on a banned list.
Yeah.
So, we were kind of like, fighting with the Russians. And so the Russians weren't giving us like transportation licenses. So it turned out our only option was to deliver by air freight. And we realized that the ammo that was we were sourced in Albania was packaged in these heavy wooden crates. It was in these metal tins,
Yeah.
which was like vacuum sealed. They call them sardine cans.
Yeah.
And then the sardine cans are put in these heavy wooden crates.
Right.
And the wooden crates are not really necessary.
Right.
Right.
They probably add a lot of cost.
And they add a lot of weight.
Yeah.
It's an air freight is all about weight.
Right.
Right. So we realized, hey, if we get rid of these wooden crates, maybe we can save enough money to make this profitable
Right.
again. So that's when we, sent someone over to Albania to inspect it, and turned out the weight of the crates was quite high. And
Yeah.
once we got rid of the weight of the crates, it became profitable again.
So you guys just sent someone to Albania, like
Yeah.
go get an estimate of how much these crates weigh?
Yes, exactly. Well, originally we were going to get the Albanians to do it, but then Ephraim was like, we can't trust the Albanians.
Yeah.
We need to do this ourselves. And
Yeah.
he didn't want me to, in the movie, I go to Albania.
Right.
But he didn't want me to go because I was like dealing with like 11 different countries for the other sources of
Gotcha.
supply. And I was
Gotcha.
also like handling everything on the government side with Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois, who were the contracting officers.
Right.
And so he wanted me to stay in Miami and like kind of like arrange the whole, like manage the whole contract.
Right.
And so we hired one of my best friends, a guy named Alex, who had just gotten out of the French military, to go. He was looking for a job. And so we hired him to go do the Albanian inspections. When he was there and he did the inspection, he calls me up and he's like, hey, there's like Chinese markings on all the crates. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm like, this is Albanian ammo. And he's like, no, there's Chinese. I'm like, are you sure it's not Korean? He's like, dude, I can tell Chinese. And I tell Ephraim, and Ephraim's like, have him send me some pictures. I want to make sure he's not an idiot.
Yeah.
Which was a very idiotic thing for him to do in the long term, because then there was
Evidence.
emailed evidence
that it was
that we knew
that
about
was
everything.
intentional. Wow.
Exactly. So Alex emails him, pictures of the crates, and we knew right away it was Chinese.
Oh my God.
And this was a problem for us because in our contract with the U.S. Army, it specifically said no Chinese ammunition can be delivered under this contract,
Right.
either directly or indirectly. And the reason they put that in there was because there's an arms embargo against China
Right.
that was put in place in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And but our contract didn't specify that ammunition that violates the terms of the embargo, right, is
Right.
not allowed. It just said no Chinese, period.
Right.
Right. So this ammunition that was in Albania was sent to Albania in the 70s, before the embargo even existed.
Okay.
So this ammunition didn't actually violate the terms of the embargo.
Right.
It just violated the terms of our commercial contract with the Army, because they wrote the contract very broadly.
Right.
More broadly than the embargo.
Yeah.
So we were faced with a choice at the time. We were thinking, well, maybe we should ask the Army to give us a waiver. We're like, hey guys, kind of wrote the contract too broad. You guys wrote this in reference to the embargo. This doesn't violate the terms of the embargo. Can you give us a waiver?
Right.
And in retrospect, they would have done it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the time, we didn't. We were thinking, well, what if they say something like, well, it's not really fair that we give you this waiver because General Dynamics, who was very upset,
Yeah.
that they filed like protests with the Army that we won because
Yeah.
they were expecting to win this contract. General Dynamics, had to bid on this contract responsibly,
Right.
knowing that they can't bid on this stuff because that was the terms of the contract. So it's not fair that we give you a waiver. So
Right.
we're going to cancel your contract and put it out for bid again. That's
Right,
what we
right.
thought
That's
they
what you
would
thought would
say.
happen.
And we're like, we don't want to lose a $300 million contract.
Right.
So we're like, you know what? Why don't we not tell them about it? And
Yeah.
what they don't know won't hurt them. Well, let's just, repackage the ammunition
Yeah.
to get rid of all the evidence that it's Chinese.
Because the only evidence was on the crates.
On the crates. So, the obvious evidence was
Yeah.
on the crates. There was Chinese markings on the crates. There was also documents with Chinese markings inside the sardine cans. So we had to get rid of the sardine cans as well. The sardine cans also had markings on them,
Right.
but we had to do a complete repack.
Wow.
So
On how many rounds?
it was in total about 150 million. Yeah. It was enormous. It was enormous. And each aircraft had about could fit after the repack, so we could fit more in there because it was more tightly repacked. We could fit about a little under 3 million rounds per aircraft. Yeah, and there's 45 tons. So we were shipping 3 million at a time into Afghanistan, 150. So it was like. And then I think later they increased the amount by I think it was by either another 50 or 100 million later.
Wow.
But initially it was 150 million. Yeah. So we realized we had to do a complete repack. And we got permission from the Army to do we told them it was so we could inspect it and stuff. And they're like, yeah, good idea, inspect it. And but it was on record that it was by email. There was email evidence that we knew why we were repacking.
Oh my God.
There was email evidence for everything, and that's kind of what.
So you guys just decided, all right, we're gonna go repack 150 million rounds of ammo.
Yeah.
What was that process actually like?
So we had Alex we knew we wanted to repackage it into a configuration that was as light as possible to save on the air freight. So we decided to go with these like thick double-walled corrugated cardboard boxes.
Gotcha.
Right? And which were strong enough to hold the ammo, but they were as light as you could reasonably make it. So you had to go source
cardboard boxes of this
So we had to go source cardboard boxes.
That's got to be expensive.
So
for that
a lot cheaper than the air freight.
Right.
A lot cheaper. Right. So we decided that the best way to go about this was to find a local manufacturer in Albania. So Alex found a box manufacturer owned by a guy named Kosta Trebishka. And we figured, hey, if we're buying the boxes, he already owns a factory. Might as well ask him to see if he could provide the labor to do the repackaging.
Yeah.
And so we got a quote from him, and I think it was about $100,000 to do the entire thing. He was going to use his people. Yeah. And we were going to save about $3 million in air freight costs.
Yeah.
So it was a no-brainer.
Yeah,
no-brainer. No-brainer.
You guys are probably thinking, this is actually a win.
Oh, it was an enormous win. We were like, we just pocketed $2.9 million because of this, you know? So, and we, avoid that potential of problem of the Chinese, or at least we thought we would avoid the potential problem of the Chinese origin. So we signed a contract with the box guy, with Kosta, to provide the boxes, provide the labor. And we started shipping it from the bunkers where they were stored. They were stored. So in the movie, they show the stuff being stored in this enormous warehouse.
Yeah.
And it's like you see a fighter jet next to a tank next to that's not how they stored it.
Okay.
Right? In real life, most of it was stored underground in bunkers.
Okay.
Because the reason, so Albania has this interesting history of why they have so much ammo and why it's all Chinese. During the Cold War, they were run by this crazy dictator who was like, in some ways, worse than North Korea.
Wow.
He was like that isolationist. And he was like a communist diehard, and he thought that the guys in Moscow were a bunch of corrupt assholes who weren't true communists. And so he pulled out of his like alliance with the Soviet Union and made an alliance with the Chinese. And he thought the Soviets tend not to like that, and they tend to invade people who pull out it, like they did in Czechoslovakia and other places.
Right.
So he thought he was going to get invaded by the Soviets, and he also thought, because he's a true communist, that he'd get invaded by NATO, by the West. So he thought the world's two superpowers were going to invade him. Yeah. And so his strategy was to create a massive network of underground bunkers all over the country and fill them with ammo and weapons so that they'd be safe from bombardment. Yeah. Right. And his strategy was what he called total war, where every man, woman, and child in the country becomes a soldier and they all fight to the death. Wow. Right. That was his plan. Wow. And so to support that, he got his new besties, the Chinese, to supply him with a massive amount of ammo and weapons. And the Chinese were thrilled because they got like a foothold in Europe. They got, all their intelligence officers to be based out of Albania. Yeah. They got like I don't know if they had a port there or they got use of the port. So they had like their own reasons why they were thrilled to supply the Albanians with free weapons and ammo. Right. But because of that, Albania became one of the most armed places on earth per capita. Like when their economy collapsed in the 90s, their medium of exchange was ammunition. Like that you would buy like eggs or milk in the morning with a crate of ammo. Wow. Yeah, before they like reestablished their paper money system. That's how armed it was.
Okay. Yeah. So they just had a shitload of ammo.
They had a shitload of ammo, and at the time they were trying to join NATO. They're in NATO now, but they were in 2007. They were trying to join NATO, and one of NATO's requirements was that they get rid of all their old Soviet ammo because it's not compatible with the NATO system. They don't like that sitting there. You know, they wanted, you know, if you're in the alliance, you need to use the alliance's weapon systems, like the M16, not the AK-47. So they were required to destroy all that stuff, which they were going to have to pay for to get destroyed. And they started destroying some of it. And it actually, that whole process turned into a huge scandal over there. They had enormous explosion at a place called Gerdek. Because there was, people think that we were involved with it. We have nothing to do with it. It was another American company called Southern Ammunition that had the contract to oversee the destruction of a lot of their munitions. And they were subcontracting with the Albanians, just like we were. And their subcontractors, they were had kids taking apart tank shells, smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
You know, so it was not good.
Professional,
And not professional. It blew up. It killed a whole bunch of people. It became a big political scandal. But nothing to do with us. Just saying that, because I get a lot of hate from Albanians online, you know, for being part of that, but it had nothing to do with us.
Gotcha.
But anyway, we were you know, hired Costa to do the repackaging. But then Ephraim, of course, wanted to make more money, as he always did. And he tried to renegotiate with the Albanians to get a lower price.
On the repackaging?
Not on the repackaging, on the actual sale of the ammo.
Okay.
And they said, we know you're hiring these other guys to do the repackaging. Why don't you give us that contract so we could make money on repackaging?
Right.
And then we'll give you a discount on the ammo.
Yeah.
Because that way it's a win-win.
Right.
And Ephraim's like, yeah, sure, fuck that guy. I'm not tied to him.
Yeah.
He's fired, you're hired. Let's do this.
Yeah.
That guy calls me up, Costa calls me up, and he's like, hey, I understand it's business, but I got stuck with 20 grand worth of boxes.
Yeah.
Can you at least buy them?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
Yeah.
I'll buy them from
Of course.
And I tell Ephraim, and Ephraim's like, oh, I talked to the new guys. They already bought their boxes. They don't want to deal with this guy. And I'm like, well, so I tell Ephraim, like, just pay the guy 20 grand.
Yeah.
You know?
He just paid all of his money on these boxes.
Yeah. You know, we kind of left him, you know, out in the cold.
That's the right thing to do.
And he's like, nah, we don't need to do that. And I'm like, we should really do that.
Yeah.
He knows everything.
Oh my God.
And Ephraim's, nah, what's he going to do? Fuck that guy. I guarantee he's a nobody. He's not going to do anything. Oh. And I'm like, Ephraim, that's a really bad idea.
$20,000 insurance
It's 20
policy.
grand. We have a $300 million contract. Yeah. And I was like, I was thinking, man, maybe I should pay him because you know, we can get it. And but like so my agreement with Ephraim was that, you know, I was working on commission only. I wasn't getting any salary.
Right.
I was living off the 100 grand that I had at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that was dwindling. At this point, I had like 25, 30 grand left.
Right.
And Ephraim still hadn't paid me for any of the contracts we had done together because every time at the end of a contract, we were already working on a new contract.
Right.
And he would be like, you know, I'm using my money to finance these deals.
Right.
Because like, when you're selling items to the government, they only pay you 30 days after you deliver.
Right.
So you have to pay the supplier in advance and then pay the shipping company in advance and then wait 30 days after you deliver to get the money from the government. And he's like, I'm putting all my money into this. It's only fair you put your money into it.
Yeah.
You just made a bunch of money on this propane contract, on this gun parts contract. Why don't we roll it into the next thing?
Yeah.
You know, so he kept on rolling and I was like an idiot.
You're
and I was like, you know, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. It's only fair. You're doing your thing. I'll do my part, you know? And I'm like, you know, fair's fair. And so like I was down to like my last 25, 30K.
Yeah.
This guy is like, hey, you owe me 25 grand, 20K. And I'm like, I'm not comfortable like putting
your
like,
last money
at my last penny.
Yeah.
I still had to pay rent and you know, I had like a child I had to support.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, I told him, I'm like, this is a very bad idea. You should pay the guy.
Yeah.
I can't pay him myself. I would if I could, but you should pay him because, you know, this is a contract with you, with our company.
Right.
And he knows everything, so it's worth it as insurance. And he's like, nah, fuck that guy. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, okay. Well, I said, listen, I tried. So he really should have paid him because that guy got really mad and he called up the New York Times and told them about what we were doing.
Wow.
And he called up the FBI and told them what we were doing. And his biggest mistake is he called up the local Albanian press and he told them that, probably true, that the local Albanian politicians were getting kickbacks from our deal, which is a big problem in Albania. Corruption is like the number one
Yeah.
political issue there. Now, we weren't paying the Albanians directly. We were paying through a Swiss arms dealer. Guy
Okay.
in the movie, he's played by Bradley Cooper.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
And in real life, he's based on a real guy.
Yeah.
His real name is Henry Tomei, not Henry Gerard, as they call him
Okay.
in the movie. But in real life, he was a lot more clean cut than Bradley portrayed.
Okay.
Bradley has this like rough character.
Yeah,
He's like
yeah.
all bloodshot and
Yeah.
like unshaven. And, in real life, he looked more like a Swiss banker.
Right.
Like very well kept, very soft spoken, And
Yeah.
he's like the real deal. This guy's been in the business for like 30 years and like he has connections everywhere. He was like best friends with the prime minister of Albania's son, which is how he made this deal for us.
Gotcha.
He connected us with the Albanian government. We were paying everything through Henry. Henry was paying the Albanians.
And he was greasing the
I
officials
imagine.
in
I
some
don't
capacity.
know. It would be illegal for me to know that,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because it's illegal to pay foreign officials bribes as a U.S. citizen.
But whether he was or he wasn't, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I was paying him. That's
Yeah.
all I needed to know. But Costa told the Albanian press that
Right.
these guys were I don't know if he knew or if he was guessing.
Yeah.
But he said that, and that it became a big scandal in Albania.
Ah.
And like a week later, Costa ended up dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that in the movie?
So in the movie, they say that that the driver ended up disappearing.
Yeah.
In real life, there was no driver.
Okay.
In real life, it was the box guy who got killed.
Right.
Now, they made it look like an accident.
Yeah.
Very suspicious accident. They found him face down in the dirt in some field.
Yeah.
Where he had been run over by his own car, and there was no other cars there.
Yeah.
So, like, what happened there?
Yeah.
Of course, the Albanian government classified it as an accident.
Right.
Right.
Gotcha.
And they closed the investigation, and that was that.
That was done.
But I don't think anyone really thinks it was an accident.
Yeah.
I think that most people think it was because it happened like a week or two after the Albanian press published their articles that made the Albanian politicians look really bad, and it came out later the Albanian politicians were in league with the Albanian mob who were getting a piece of the action. And so, yeah, I mean, like when Ephraim negotiated with the Albanians, he was negotiating with a guy named Deliorgi.
Okay.
And later on, Deliorgi went to prison for being involved in the Gerdek explosion and also
Gotcha.
being like part of organized crime in Albania.
Gotcha.
So there was some connection between the Albanian politicians and organized crime in Albania. Now we were paying Henry, so we
Right.
weren't directly, connected, but yeah, so that the mob's involvement makes Costa's death even more suspicious.
Yeah. So you guys get this stuff
Yeah.
repackaged. Does it get sent out there? What are the next steps here?
So after it gets repackaged, we hired a transportation company. They used IL-76 aircraft. It's the old Soviet cargo aircraft.
Yeah.
They could fit 45, 48 if you're really stretching tons per aircraft load. And just loaded aboard the aircraft. We got all our overflight permits. So we actually got all the overflight permits except like Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
And where was it? Turkmenistan. I always confuse those two countries. I should look it up.
Yeah.
But either Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan. And they refused to give it to us because like Putin had just visited, or they were going to give it to us, and then Putin visited like for a state visit, and then they canceled the thing. We're like, what the fuck, like the Putin is interfering with our contract.
Yeah.
Like what's going on? And then I realized that these guys have it was Turkmenistan. It was Turkmenistan because it was the Turkmenistan national airline. Mm-hmm. I realized they have a national airline and they provide cargo services. So I got a quote from them. And they were actually surprisingly pretty competitive.
Yeah.
And so we hired them, and as soon as we hired them, they got the overflight permit.
That's smart.
Yeah, and then we started rolling. We started getting like 3 to 4 aircraft loads every week into Afghanistan, and the money was rolling, everything was going great, and I was finally able to. I was like working 18-hour days for like months, at a stretch.
Yeah.
And finally, things were going like clockwork. All I had to do was, fill out the paperwork, make sure that everything was done on time, coordinate between, Alex on the ground in Albania and the guy on the ground in Kabul and the people in the contracting officer in Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois to make sure all the paperwork moved,
Right.
And that was pretty much it. I was able to manage the entire contract in just a few hours a day. And I was finally able to like get some sleep and go to the gym and relax a little. And so I started coming into the office a little bit less.
Yeah.
I wasn't there all day and all night.
Yeah.
And at this point, we had like about 15 people working for us.
Yeah.
Ephraim had like a little boiler room where he was selling stuff on the commercial market to like the shooting sports industry. And so one day Ephraim comes into my office and he says to me, like all the rest of the employees had gone out for the day. And he says to me, he's like, a lot of the guys around the office, they're telling me that you're not pulling your weight around here anymore.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? The contract's going great.
Yeah.
We're delivering 4 aircraft loads a week. The money's rolling. We've solved all the problems. What's the problem? He's like, yeah. The Afghan contract's going great. But we've got some contracts in Iraq that are really struggling and you're not helping with those. And I said, but I work on a commission basis. I'm not one of your employees.
Yeah.
You want to give me a piece of those contracts? I'll work on them. He's like, oh, don't be crazy. I mean, you didn't help us win those contracts. Why should I give you a piece of them? I'm like, then why should I help you with them?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, because, if those contracts go down, the entire company could go down and that could take the Afghan contract with it. And I'm like, so you got to help. You got to watch out for the company. I'm like, well, you want to give me a piece of the company then?
Yeah.
And he says, you know what, David? He's like, I'll tell you what. I own 100% of AEY and I always plan to keep it that way. But you're my best friend, and you're also a big part of why AEY is where we are today. And so I wouldn't make this offer to anyone else. But for you, I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to give you a very generous $100,000 a year executive salary and 1% of AEY. And I'm like, well, the Afghan contract, I get 25% of that.
And that's the vast
And that's
majority.
going to make us like 90% of the money we're going to make over the next few years.
Yeah.
And I'm set to make $15 million from it. So I appreciate your $100,000 salary, but I'll stick with my $15 million.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you very much. But no, thank
clear
you.
and obvious.
Yeah. And he says to me, he's like, well, how about 0? Because that's the only offer on the table.
Of the 15 million he's talking?
Yeah. He's like, how about, you either take the 1% of AEY and $100,000 a year, or I'm giving you nothing. And I'm like, we have an agreement. He's like, well, that's the only offer on the table.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's what he says to me. And I'm like, well, go fuck yourself. I'll see you in court.
Oh
and
my
I walk
God.
out, and that was the last day I worked at AEY.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fucking insane.
Yeah.
So you walk out, you're done with him.
Yeah.
When do you get hit with the news?
So I was super depressed for like a good 2-3 weeks after that. Like, guys, I was like on my last bit of money.
So he just said you're not getting your $15 million. You either get $100,000 a year or 1% or nothing.
That's what he said. Yeah.
And you guys had agreed on the
We even had a handwritten contract. It was not an official lawyer written agreement. We had a handwritten contract that he had signed, and that was in my apartment building. This is actually true. It was in my because he would come over my apartment. We lived in the same building.
Yeah.
And he would come over my apartment and we'd like work late into the night. And my contract was on my table. We had just signed it. I tried to scan it.
Yeah.
My scanner was broken.
Yeah.
And I was planning on getting my scanner fixed. A few days later, before I'd scanned it, my contract disappeared.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And I was like, did the cleaning lady throw it out? I think he was the only guy in my apartment, So like, what the fuck just happened
What
there?
a scumbag.
Now, of course, I couldn't prove anything, but he was really the only person who had access to my apartment at the time, and it mysteriously disappeared.
What a
And
scumbag.
then a few days later, he hits me with this whole, like you're getting 0.
Wow.
So like I am 99% sure that it was him. He did it on purpose.
Yeah.
I can't prove it. I didn't see him steal it. But like
So
there was.
did
it was
you even
really the
have
only
did
thing.
you have time to sue
Yeah.
him, or did the legal issues come
Right.
into play?
So what happened after I left was I was getting ready to sue him. We, like my lawyer was talking to his lawyer, and we were, he gave me, he's like, you know what? I'll give you $300K right now to buy you out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, $300, you owe me like $15 million.
Yeah.
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 And my lawyer says, look, do you have a bunch of money saved up? Because if you sue him, you're going to need a few $100K to sue him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really have a few $100K to sue him.
Yeah.
Because, to pay the lawyer fees. Maybe you can get a lawyer to do it on contingency, but most lawyers want at least partial contingency. So he's like, you don't even have enough money to sue him.
Right.
So, you could get $300K now or maybe nothing later.
Right.
And who knows how, and even if you win, I knew he had secret offshore accounts in the Seychelles Islands because he had mentioned it.
Yeah, good luck collecting.
Yeah, exactly. I knew, and he's the kind of guy to hide his money.
Right.
Considering how he did business.
Yeah.
So I was like, even if I win, I may not collect. So let me just take the $300K now. At least I won't be out on the street. I'll be able to support my kid.
Right.
I had a 1-year-old daughter at the time.
Right.
And I'll be able to, move on with my life and do something else. I won't be set for life like I was expecting, but at least I won't be broke and homeless on the street.
Lesson learned.
So, exactly, I learned a lot, and so I was like, you know what? I'll take the $300K buyout.
Right.
We were, he wanted to stretch it over a course of a few years. I was like, you're fucking nuts. Give it to me now. As soon as you agree to something, he asks for more. Yeah.
Wow.
His whole philosophy was you negotiate down the number as much as you can, and then you stretch out the payment terms as long as you can.
That's what he did in the contract.
Yeah, and that's exactly. That's what he did to me. And so, we were fighting. The fighting went on for like a good month and a half, and finally we got it to a point where we both agreed. I was set to sign the contract and get the payment the next day.
Yeah.
I get a call from one of the secretaries at the office. I was on good terms with everyone at the office.
Yeah.
He was like the asshole boss.
Yeah.
I was the nice guy. You
right.
know? And he would walk into the office and start screaming at everybody. I don't pay you motherfuckers to talk to each other. Go on your computers, make me some fucking money.
Yeah.
He would literally do that.
Yeah.
Everyone hated him, but they put up with him. He was just one of those kind of bosses. And so the secretary calls me up and she's like, hey, David, I just wanted to let you know, but the feds just raided the office.
Oh my God.
They told everyone to step away from their computers and leave. They kicked us all out, and they're boxing up all the filing cabinets, and they're taking all the documentation and taking all our computers. And I'm like, holy crap, we're fucked. We're fucked. That's it. It's the end.
Wow.
And I'm like, I am fucked. And so I call up a defense attorney, and he tells me, well, why don't you go into your emails and see what kind of evidence they have against you? And that's when I realized there's quite a bit of it. There's the images that Alex sent over from Albania. There was some, so we had an investor, a guy named Ralph. In the movie, he's portrayed as this Jewish laundromat owner.
Yeah.
In real life, his name was Ralph, but in real life, he was a Mormon, and he owned a machine gun factory in Utah. It was very little reality there in the character. But Ralph had sent us an email because he was involved in the management of the project. Right. He had $1.5 million of his own money invested. And so Ralph had sent us an email with step-by-step instructions of how to sand Chinese markings off wooden crates with pictures of step 1, step 2, where he had tried it out himself. I don't know.
Did he get pulled into the lawsuit?
He did. Well, not the lawsuit. Well, he sued Ephraim because Ephraim ended up stealing all Ralph's money too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Not only did Ephraim not give Ralph the profit he owed him, he never paid him back his principal investment. He literally stole $1.5 million from him.
Did Ralph get in trouble for telling you guys how to sand?
He did. Ralph ended up doing, I think, 3.5 years in prison.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
because he fought them. If he had pled guilty, he probably wouldn't have done time.
Gotcha.
But he decided to fight it in court.
How did you even afford a lawyer at that time?
That's a good question. So the first thing my lawyer tells me is go check out the evidence, and I come back to him with all these emails, and he's like, okay, this evidence is pretty, pretty tight. You have a low chance. Maybe we could get it thrown out on a technicality, but there's no guarantee. And anyway, if you fight him in court, you're going to need about $200,000 to $300,000.
Right.
So do you have that money? And he goes to me before saying this. He's like, I don't want to make it light of the situation, but as they say in my business, how much justice can you afford?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how much justice can I afford? Not much. Not much. I have $20,000 left to my name. And he's like, ooh, that's going to be barely enough to plead guilty.
Oh my God.
And he's like, I can take you through the whole guilty plea process, but that's going to take about $30,000.
Wow.
So I had to like borrow money to plead guilty. To plead guilty, I had to go into debt. And so, and you need a lawyer when you're pleading guilty just so the prosecutors don't fuck you, you know, in the plea agreement.
Right.
You know? So the way it works when you plead guilty is you sign a plea agreement, right? It's a contract with the prosecutors where you lay out all the things you admit to.
Yeah.
And the prosecutors agree to, in writing, to ask the judge to go easy on you.
Right.
You know, so there's and they also agree to get rid of all the other charges and combine it. So they make a special agreement with you, right?
Gotcha.
So they charged us with 71 acts of fraud. They're like, you know, if you plead guilty, we'll combine it into one.
Yeah.
So the max you can get is 5. We'll tell the judge to go easy on you. So maybe you'll get 1, maybe just probation. Up to the judge, right? So I was like, okay, let me think about this. You know, I didn't really have a choice because I didn't even have the money to fight it, even if I did want to take that chance. But but it's bad. You know, it's a bad bet to make.
Yeah.
So I pled guilty. Eventually, Ephraim pled guilty as well because he tried to fight him for a while, but then he realized he was going to lose.
Right.
And so he pled guilty. But part of the plea agreement, of course, is that you commit no further crimes, right? Because if you commit before you get sentenced, right? If you commit another crime, then the prosecutors can't tell the judge, hey, he's
go easy on him.
Yeah, go easy on him. He's made, you know, he's
it's the void in the agreement.
Exactly. You know, you void the agreement. You know, you can't say, they can't tell the judge he's going to be a good citizen from now on if you go out in there and committing more crimes.
Of course.
So I was scared shitless, of course, as is very reasonable, and I went back to school, like, you know, went back to doing massage therapy because they said I can't do government contracting, and I got a job working at a food bank because my lawyer told me looks good to the judge to work for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was my life. You know, I was like, you know, just keeping my nose clean, as they say, you know, as much as I could.
Right.
Ephraim didn't roll like that. Right. So Ephraim, you know, they told him you can't do government contracting, you can't be in the arms business.
Did he get a similar plea deal?
He did. Oh. Yeah, so he got a similar.
So you guys got the same plea deal, even though he owned the company and was like.
So the one difference between our plea deals was that I assume I'm not aware of, you know, the discussions between his lawyers and the prosecutors, but I imagine they would have suggested to the judge a higher sentence than me.
Right.
But it would still be within
one
that.
Count.
Yeah, it would still be that 1 count. That was the deal. Yeah. You know, that they would reduce it down to 1 count. So the most he can get was 5 years.
Right.
And because of the plea deal, you know, not 5 years anyway. You know, maybe 3.
Right.
So, so he got the similar deal. So Ephraim decides that, you know, he's invincible, and he has one of his latest minion, you know, who is working for him, start a company under his own name, not under his name, you know, so he could do business through this other guy's business, and through this other guy's business, he tries to do a deal with this gun dealer in like Central Florida, right? And it was to import like magazines from Korea and like put their brand on it so that he could sell it in the. It was a completely legitimate deal, you know.
But he's not allowed to be doing it.
He's just not allowed to be doing it. He's trying to do it through this other guy. The gun dealer, you know, realizes who he is at some point in their negotiations, and realizes this guy is in trouble, right? He just pled guilty, you know, so he calls up the ATF, right?
Yeah.
The Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Administration, and says, hey, I got this. Cause they're the ones who give you the federal firearms license, the ATF. And so he calls up the ATF and he says, hey, I got this guy trying to do this deal with me. You know, he was just convicted on this other gun-related charge, which, you know, he probably thought that Ephraim was trying to entrap him into something to get like a reduction on his sentence. I assume. I don't know what he was thinking. It's a reasonable assumption, right? So he asked the gun dealer asked the ATF, what should I do about this? Yeah. ATF says, very interesting. Why don't you introduce one of our undercover agents as your business partner to him? So he introduces the undercover agent to Ephraim. Undercover agent tells Ephraim, you know, I'm the kind of guy who, you know, needs to look you in the eye and shake your hand to do a deal, you know? Why don't you come up to Orlando so we could meet and finalize this deal? And Ephraim, you know, he's like, oh yeah, I'm that kind of guy too. It's how men do business, you know? And he's like, yeah, I'll be up there next weekend. The ATF agent knew that part of Ephraim's bond, because he was, out, awaiting sentencing, out on bond. Part of the bond agreement is that he's not allowed to leave the Southern District of Florida. So the ATF guy insisted that he break that, go to Central Florida. So Ephraim gets in his car, drives up to Orlando. ATF agent meets him. ATF agent also knows Ephraim's now a convicted felon, right? So it's illegal for Ephraim to be in possession of a firearm.
Right.
It's also illegal for you to hand a convicted felon a firearm.
Right.
So what does the ATF guy do? He pops the trunk of his car and he says to Ephraim, check out that gun I brought. I got the latest HK on the market. Yeah. And Ephraim says, oh, I heard about that thing. That thing is so cool. Let me see it. Picks it up. Let's go to the range and fire a few rounds, because what can I say? Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. Am I right? And the ATF agent takes out his cuffs, slaps him on his wrist. He's like, you're a felon in possession of a firearm. You're under arrest. Oh, my God. So he got a firearm possession felony, which you can get up to 10 years in prison for.
Wow.
Plus, he invalidated the plea agreement for his fraud charge, which he could get up to 5 years in prison. So combined, he could have gotten 15 years. But he hired the best lawyers in Miami. He spent like a couple million, I heard.
Did he get the millions from that contract?
So he kept all the money.
So he actually got the profits?
Yes, because the government pays you as you deliver.
And they, 30 days they didn't take the money back after? So
what happened was so they sentenced, he could have gotten 15 years in prison. Yeah. They ended up, he negotiated with the best lawyers. He ended up negotiating down to 4 years for both charges. Now, the way fraud charges work is when you commit fraud, you get your punishment, your prison time, but you also have to make restitution to the victim, right? Now, restitution, right, goes on how much the victim lost.
Right.
Now, the Army didn't lose anything. Right. In fact, they saved they would have saved $52 million if they hadn't canceled our contract.
Right.
So how are they going to say, oh, Ephraim, you need to pay the losses to the victim if they not only didn't lose, but they made?
Right.
So the only losses the Army could claim was the cost of canceling the contract and putting it out for bid to replace the source, to replace the contractor.
Right.
They claimed that cost them $350,000. That's what they claimed.
Yeah.
So that was the fine that Ephraim had to pay.
So he made all that money?
He made all that money. Now, they canceled the contract, I think at the point where he had delivered about $70 million.
Yeah. Okay.
So he didn't deliver the full $300 million. Right. But he was averaging about 20% margin on $70 million.
He still made money.
So he made about $14 million on that contract.
What a
plus all the other money he made. So I think he walked away from it with about like $20-ish million.
What a crazy story! I understand now why they made a movie about it. Now I get it. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So how are you? How is life post all this stuff now?
I feel very lucky, I should say. I'll be the first person to say I feel extremely fortunate. I didn't make a penny from it, which obviously I'm not happy about. I would have liked to make 20 million myself, but that's life. At least I didn't go to prison.
Yeah.
I got sentenced to 7 months of house arrest, which is, nothing. It's a little slap on the wrist. I feel very fortunate for that. And for me, that's where I'd rather not have the 20 million, and have,
100%.
My freedom,
100%.
You can make more money. You can never make more time,
100%.
So I was very happy with how it ended. I would have.
Are you allowed to do government contracting now?
So I am now.
Okay, that's how you're able to do what you're doing now.
So I just got off the ban list. I was banned from government contracting for 15 years.
Wow.
And it just expired.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Back in action.
Yeah. Well, I got into a whole bunch of other businesses in the meantime in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
So the first business I got into was actually while I was under house arrest. And it was the inspiration. What?
That's quick.
Yeah. Well, it was it was one of those things where it was like the worst thing turned out to be the best thing for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while I was under house arrest, it wasn't like a COVID style lockdown. Like people could visit me. I just couldn't leave my apartment.
Right.
I had like the ankle tracking thing, a government mandated babysitter, who would call me up and yell at me if, the ankle thing told him I was out of my apartment. You know? I was under house arrest and, as I said, none of my musician friends wanted to bring their drum set over, so I got a drum machine.
Yeah.
But every time I wanted the beat to change, like when I would go from like verse to chorus in a song, I would have to stop playing my guitar, press a button on the machine to change the beat, go back to playing my guitar, interrupted the flow of the music.
Yeah.
So I thought I need a drum machine on the floor in a pedal format so I could control it hands-free with my foot while I play.
Yeah.
And I was sure someone made like something like this. And I'm like, this is such an obvious idea.
Yeah.
So I went online to try to buy it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And I told my musician friends about it, like to see if they'd heard of anything like this. And they're like, I've never seen anything like it, but if you find it, let me know. I want to get one too. That sounds super cool.
Yeah.
So I realized if everyone wants it, nobody's making it.
Yeah.
This is like a huge opportunity.
Right.
So to make a long story short, it took me about 3 years, but I made it. It's my first product. It's called the Beat Buddy, like a buddy that plays the beat. It's the world's first guitar pedal drum machine. And it allows you to control a drum beat hands-free while you play your instrument.
So you could create the beat, and then if you can create like a beat for the verse and the chorus, you can swap between them as you're playing.
Correct. So the way it works is, so it has a bunch of different functions, but like to change from verse to chorus, you hold the pedal down. It does like a transition beat as long as you hold the pedal down. When you let go, it goes to the other beat.
Did you have to build software for that too?
Yes. Yeah. So it was... It was a multi engineering field project. I had
doesn't sound very easy
because it's hardware, it's software, it's firmware.
Yeah.
So it's a guitar pedal, but it's kind of like a computer inside a guitar pedal because it's a MIDI drum machine. So it's a computer. And it has, I needed an electrical engineer to design the PCB board. I needed a firmware engineer to make the software that goes on the device. I needed regular software engineer to make like the Windows and Mac software to put the content onto the unit.
Right.
So you can put your own content on the Beat Buddy. Like you can make your own beats on like GarageBand or whatever software you're using.
Right.
And put it in the Beat Buddy to customize your beats.
Gotcha.
It comes out of the box. It comes with an enormous amount of beats and drum sets.
That's cool.
That comes right out of there, but you could also put your own stuff on there. And we have like an online forum where our customers, share the content they make for the Beat Buddy. So there's constantly new stuff coming out.
So you did that.
So it's like a whole ecosystem. Yeah.
How long were you on house arrest?
So I was under house arrest for like 7 months, but it took me like 3 years to actually make a fully functional prototype.
Did that business become something substantial for you?
Yeah. No, I've sold many millions of dollars worth of Beat Buddies over the years. Yeah, so it's a multi-million-dollar business now.
If you hadn't been on house arrest, you probably never would have made that.
That's true.
And that's more down your alley of passion than arms dealing.
Exactly. And I'm a lot more proud of it, I should say, because it's, first of all, it's something new. It's not like as glamorous as Hollywood makes arms dealing. You're really just a transportation guy. You're just moving it buying from point A, but one guy selling it to another, moving it. It's a logistics thing.
So then by the time you've kind of made that product, is that around the time when you got to speak with Rolling Stone and have that interview? 3 years.
So no, it was so Rolling Stone, they contacted me in 2008.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I got the timeline wrong. I get it.
When the New York Times article came out, they contacted me and they made a deal with my lawyer that they wouldn't publish anything until all my legal jeopardy was done. So they were able to do the interviews while I was under, house arrest and all that. So the Rolling Stone article came out in 2011, actually while I was, it was shortly after I got off house arrest. I was still under probation.
Gotcha.
Because I remember my probation officer, I had to go into his office once a week or something, after I got off house arrest. My probation officer, I came into his office one day and he has the Rolling Stone issue and he's like, "What is this, Packouz?" He's like, "You talking about how we do our business around here?" And I'm like, that's journalism. And he's like, and then he starts looking nervous and he's like, "You're not going to tell them how the probation office works, right?" I'm like, I don't think anyone cares.
Depends how you treat me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, it's probation officers. They're like, I think they feel like it's their professional duty to be dicks.
Yeah.
So
it kind of is their duty.
Yeah, exactly.
So you get this article published in Rolling Stone.
Yes.
How long of an article is it?
It was actually one of the longest articles they've ever published because they kept on investigating for the entire 3 years.
Yeah.
So they didn't just so Guy Lawson, the author, the journalist who did this article, he didn't just interview me. He also interviewed Ephraim for a little bit. Ephraim cut him off after the second or third interview because Ephraim wanted to do his own thing, as he always does.
Yeah.
But he also interviewed Alex, who was our guy on the ground in Albania. He also interviewed a bunch of some on the record, some off the record, like people who worked in the government. So he got their perspective as well.
Yeah.
And he also, and because Ralph ended up going to trial,
Right.
and through the trial process, there's a lot of discovery, that's actually how we discovered that the U.S. Army knew about the Chinese stuff the entire time. Because they were but even before we delivered a round, the State Department, they have an embassy in Albania.
Right.
They know the history of Albania.
Right.
They know all that stuff is Chinese. Of course they knew.
Yeah.
They didn't care. In fact, they told us specifically, they're like, yeah, this is a great deal for everybody. It
Yeah.
helps the Albanians get rid of their stuff, helps the Afghanis.
So if there was no New York Times article, it probably never
they
would
would have let it go.
materialized.
They would have let it go. So after the Justice Department raided the office in August, they sent, this came out in Ralph's trial, they sent an email to the U.S. Army informing them this stuff is Chinese, that you may want to stop taking delivery on it. The Army writes back to the Justice Department that this ammunition is critical to the mission in Afghanistan, and if the Justice Department insists on the Army stopping to take delivery, they'll need a letter from the Attorney General of the United States, who's the head of the Justice Department.
Yeah.
That letter never came.
Wow.
So the Army kept on taking delivery.
Wow.
For the next 6 months.
Is that with the $70 million of the contract, you mean?
Yes, exactly. That's how he kept on delivering.
Wow.
Right? So it was another 6-7 months before the New York Times article came out. The Army kept on taking delivery and paying for stuff they absolutely knew, documented, that was Chinese.
Yeah.
They kept on paying for it. Didn't say a thing. New York Times article comes out in like March of 2008. And like 2 days later, the Army puts out his press release. We had no idea what was happening.
Really?
We were shocked and
Of course
appalled.
they did.
We're canceling the contract,
Yeah.
and all that. So
Wow.
Yeah. And then like a few days after that, the Justice Department brought charges against us.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then
It was very obvious the New York Times was the reason they did all
right.
that. Yeah.
Really because of the box manufacturer.
Yeah. And that's how the New York Times found out. Yes.
Should have.
Yeah. Should have paid the box guy. Should have paid the box guy.
So you get this article published. It's big? It's a big article.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're getting a lot of publicity.
Yeah.
What happens to you then? Are you getting inquiries? Like, how did the movie deal come out?
Right. So after the Rolling Stone article was published, the director of the Hangover movies, Todd Phillips, he read it and he thought it was an awesome story. He was like, I can make a movie out of this.
Yeah.
And he was in the middle of filming Hangover 2 at the time.
Okay.
And so he optioned the rights to the story, meaning he puts down like 20, 30 grand or something and gives it to so he optioned the rights to the article, right?
To the article.
Yeah, to the article.
Okay.
And that gives him like 2 or 3 years to like start production on the movie. Otherwise, he loses the rights to make a story based on the article.
Gotcha.
Now, that had nothing to do with me because
Right.
that's a piece of journalism,
Right.
right? Which I didn't get paid a penny for, you know? And they didn't really need to pay me a penny.
Right.
Because according to the First Amendment, freedom of speech, you can make a work of art about any public figure that you want.
Right.
And you don't have to pay them for it. You don't have to get their permission for it. And because my name was in the media, in newspapers, then I was officially considered a public figure. So Hollywood could have made this movie about me and said anything they want, whether it was true or not, and not given me a penny, and that would be totally legal. But they wanted to market it as based on the true story, so they decided to buy my life rights, they call it. So they gave me, something similar to what they gave the author of the article, option my life rights and
what do the life rights get them?
It just gets them my cooperation. That's it.
Gotcha.
That's it. Not permission of anything. They don't need it.
Yeah.
But it's just the my cooperation in the making of
being
the
involved.
movie. In being involved, exactly.
Yeah.
Like talking to the screenwriter, reviewing their screenplays, giving them feedback.
Was Ephraim
Easy
also
work for
involved
me.
in that or no?
So he was in prison at the time.
Okay.
And so it was difficult for them to deal with him, and they didn't want to anyway because he was a well-known, habitual liar,
Right.
and also very well known to be very hard to do business with.
Yeah.
So they didn't really want him involved, and they figured that if they had me, they didn't really need him.
Right.
Yeah. he ended up suing them after he got out of prison for stealing his story, even though it had nothing. He published his own book.
Yeah.
Called Once a Gun Runner.
Yeah.
Based on the line he gave the undercover ATF guy. Yeah. Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. And it's a pretty funny book. I'll give him that. Yeah. It's a funny book. It's not true.
You read it?
Of course I read it. Yeah. I mean, he wrote very nasty things about me.
Really?
Yes, very nasty. Pretty much minimized all the work I did, saying, of course he would say that because I was suing him, saying I didn't, barely did any work. I was just, pretending, all this stuff. And he put a bunch of nasty stuff in there, stuff that he actually. So one thing was actually kind of funny that he put in there that I'll mention at this point because I just thought it was so funny. There was this one story, and it was just, I had totally forgotten that this had happened. While we were working, this was maybe a month before we had won the Afghan contract. And we had gone out to party at some club, and we didn't party that much, not like they show in the movie, but we were mostly work. We were workaholics. Yeah. Occasionally we'd go out and party. We liked actually doing karaoke. I mean, I'm a decent singer. He can't sing a note, but he would put on a great show, and everyone loves a great show. So we were driving in his car. He had an Audi A6 back then. I had an A4. So we didn't have matching Porsches like they show in the movie. We had, somewhat matching Audis. And he sees these two girls, right? Walking down this is 3 a.m, and he rolls his window down like a creep, and he's like, "Hey ladies, how's it going?" And they're actually friendly, "Hey," and he's like, "Hey, you ladies need a ride somewhere?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure," and they get into the back of his car, right? And he's like, "Oh, why don't we go to my place? And you ladies like some blow? You want to do some blow?" He's like, "Why don't you go back to my place?" And they're like, "Okay." And it was this black girl and this Asian girl, right? And we go to his apartment, and he's he lays out some coke on he loved coke.
Yeah.
He pretty much loved everything, but he especially loved coke.
Yeah.
He cut some lines on the table. He's blowing he's doing some coke. With the black girl, he starts dancing with the black girl. I'm talking to the Asian girl, and the Asian girl, I think she was less drunk than the black girl. So, we were just talking.
Yeah.
And she had this weird voice, right?
Uh-oh.
And you might know where this is going.
Yeah.
And she asks, I was like, whatever, I mean, she looked good, and she was fine, but she had this weird voice, and she asked me I have a question for you. How do you feel about trans people? And I said, well, I have nothing against trans people. I fully support everyone being what they want to be, but I'm not personally attracted to, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
I'm like, why, are you trans? Is that why you're asking? And she's like, hang on 1 second. She goes to she was the black girl was making out with him, right?
Yeah.
And she grabs her friend, and she's like, we have to go. And they go. They walk and they're everyone's like, hey, what's going on, right? They're going out the door, right? And I said, I'm like, why are you girls actually trans?
Yeah.
The black girl turns to us, and then in a deep voice says, "See you later, boy." And Ephraim's face turns white, and he's like, and he goes to me and he looks at me. He's like, "We are never telling anybody about this."
You wrote about it in his book?
He wrote about it. I totally forgot about this story. And then he wrote about it in his book, but of course he changed it so I was making out with the black girl. I guess it bothered him enough. He had to give himself some coverage there or something, I totally would have forgotten that story, except he had wrote it. So he did stuff like that,
That's hilarious.
It was a very, it was a pretty fun, I found it pretty funny, but it is.
It's funny that you switched the two of you.
Yeah. It's funny that he felt the need to do that. He felt uncomfortable enough that he had to give himself coverage for that, as if I wasn't gonna tell anyone about that, except that he wrote about it, you know.
It's so funny.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was bizarre. So yeah, so his book called Once a Gun Runner, it's 90% bullshit and 10% truth.
Yeah.
All to make him look way better, of course,
I'm sure.
you know.
I'm sure.
And in fact, the guy he wrote it, so he wrote it while he was in prison.
Yeah.
and he can't write himself, so he had a ghostwriter, a guy named Matt Cox.
Yeah.
Matt Cox got out of prison. He was in prison for like mortgage fraud. He got out of prison a year or two ago, and he started his own podcast called Inside True Crime. And he's actually doing pretty well. I was on his podcast.
Oh, cool.
And of course, Ephraim did not pay Matt a penny of the money he promised Matt for writing that book. So he screwed. So Matt told me that while he was writing Ephraim's book in prison, Ephraim was, telling him all the stories, and he was bragging. And then I fucked this guy out of the money in this way, and then I fucked that guy in that way, and I tricked him. I said this, but that really meant that. In the contract, I wrote it that way so I could screw him this way. Yeah. He was very proud of himself, right? Yeah. And Matt says to Ephraim, he's like, Ephraim, you can't just keep on like burning all your bridges, man.
Yeah.
You know? And Ephraim looks at Matt and says, Matt, there's a lot of bridges out there. And Matt told me, he's like, and the second he said that, I knew I wasn't getting paid a penny for this book. I knew I was going to be one more bridge he was going to burn.
He's just a pathological bridge burner. Doesn't care about relationships. He's a
pathological liar. He's a sociopath. I mean, I think I'm not a mental health professional, but everything I know about sociopathy, he exhibits in spades. He has zero empathy for anyone else.
Yeah.
Like he does. I think he's physically incapable.
I couldn't imagine having my best friend work on something for that long.
Yeah.
Where we got through the shit together.
Yeah.
And then said, hey, you could either take this tiny, tiny fraction of it or nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a sociopath.
Yeah. He's completely a sociopath. Yeah. And it's not just me. He screwed the guy he replaced me with, he screwed him. The guy he replaced that guy with, he screwed him. He screwed Matt, who wrote the book about him screwing everyone. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's like...
Is he allowed to do government contracts anymore?
I think he gets off the band list in next year, I believe. So he'll be back at it.
So you started War Dog Academy.
So I created the Beat Buddy, which was my first invention, and just to go chronologically, I'll get to War Dog's Academy. I created Beat Buddy, and that led to a bunch of other musical inventions for the musicians in the audience. I created the world's best looper pedal. It's called the Eros Looper. Cool. And a few other products for my company, Singular Sound. That's my music tech company that we make the Beat Buddy, the Eros, a few other products. I co-founded that company with one of my brothers because I needed someone I could trust.
Yeah.
But my brother, who's an amazing business guy and really amazing manager, he's not a musician, and he was kind of tired of working in the niche industry of the music industry, which is a small segment of the market. So he kept on like trying to brainstorm ideas with me for like a non-musical product, for a more general market product. And we came, we were getting high at my place, and we got the munchies, and we ate some mango, and we had the fibers stuck in our teeth. Yeah. And we're like, my brother asked me for some floss to get rid of the fibers, and we're both flossing in my bathroom, and he's like, and I tell him like, man, this is such a pain in the ass. If we could invent a product that could floss your teeth for you, everybody will buy that. Everybody wants it. Everyone hates to floss. Everyone knows they need a floss. And he looks at me. He's like, we have to create that. We have to. And so we start brainstorming, and it took us a few years, but eventually we came up with a product called InstaFloss. Okay. And it's an advanced water flosser. So like a water pick, which you use a single water jet. You have to trace your gum line. Right. Top, bottom, and on the inside, which is very difficult. Right. Most people, they splatter all over the place. It makes a big mess, takes time. You have to get some skill to so you angle it correctly. Yeah. So we created a device called InstaFloss where it uses 12 water jets in like an H-shaped configuration. You just bite into it and you slide the thing along your teeth, and it just gives you a perfect floss in 10 seconds. That's cool. So
InstaFloss.
InstaFloss.
I check that out. Is it on the market?
It's on the market.
On Amazon?
It's not on Amazon this second because we don't have enough inventory for it. But we were actually out of stock for the last 6 months. So because we had some issues with some manufacturing supply chain issues. But we're actually about to get a new production in the next couple weeks delivered. Nice. So InstaFloss.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's been going really, really well. Our first non-musical product. So that's very exciting.
Cool.
But one thing one new business I just started, and then I'll end with War Dogs Academy because it's more relevant to the story. But one new business I recently started, literally just a month ago, is because we've been coming out with all these products, and these products get reviewed by like various influencers, especially on YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube is a big go-to for people doing research on products.
Yeah.
Not just musical products, but any kind of product people look. And one thing we realized is that people's opinions are formed half from watching the video and half from reading the comments on the video.
Right.
Because people are like, oh, is this guy getting affiliates commission? Did he get paid for this review? People look at the comments section to get the real unbiased truth, right? Now, the thing is because we have a lot of influencers reviewing our products, a lot of these videos, they live on YouTube forever, right? And now let's say someone types in Beat Buddy into YouTube, right? What shows up at the top isn't the most recent video. Usually it's the video that's most popular. And those videos are sometimes a few years old. And sometimes the order of the search results changes depending on their internal algorithm of YouTube. So if you want to be part of that conversation in the comments, and it's very important that you do, because sometimes we see people spread misinformation about our product. Like, oh, I tried this and it didn't do that. And I'm like, you're confusing it with our competitor's product, you know? Or, it'll be like, oh, this thing has this problem. Oh, we fixed that 5 years ago. You know what I mean? So like there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of old information. And so we found it's very important to close these sales and to be on top of our brand reputation is to look at all these videos. You have to sort the comments to the most recent, go down until you start seeing the comments you've already seen. It's a big pain in the butt. Like our social media managers take a lot of time to do this. So for our own internal use, we built a tool called Comment Compass. And what that is you take the URL from YouTube. You have your own portal in commentcompass.com, and you just take the URL from YouTube. You put all the ones you want to track into your account, and anytime there's a new comment on that YouTube video, it puts it all in your feed. And we also implemented an AI system so you could sort it to see like all the questions first or negative comments first. So we have like an AI system to sort the sentiment of the comments as well. So it makes social media managers' lives a lot easier, saves them.
Comment Compass.
Comment Compass. Yeah, commentcompass.com. Yeah, it's been a huge lifesaver for our own social media managers and our companies. And we realized, if it's good for us, I mean, everyone has this problem. So, so we're starting with YouTube. Our plan is to expand to other platforms as the thing grows. But yeah, we're commentcompass.com.
That's cool.
So that's our latest thing. We just released that like a month ago. But to War Dogs Academy, the way that one started was about a year ago. This is actually relatively recent. About a year ago. Oh, well, let me go back a little further. When the movie came out in 2016. And at the time, I was full in on Singular Sound. I was just doing my music tech stuff. We hadn't even thought of InstaFloss yet. So I was just doing Singular Sound products. But after the movie came out, I started getting hundreds and hundreds of messages on like Instagram, on Facebook, and Twitter. People were saying, "Hey, teach me how to do government contracting. You can keep 90% of the profits. Just teach me. I'm desperate." Like literally hundreds of people, if not more than 1,000. I was like, well, first of all, I'm not allowed to do government contracting. Second of all, my information might be be outdated. I haven't done it in 7 years. So, I wasn't comfortable. So I would just send people a message, here, you could teach yourself at this link. And good luck. And then about a year ago, I got a message that was slightly different. And it was these two guys, a guy named Logan and James. And they told me, about 6 years ago, we were dead broke. We were 21 years old 6 years ago. We were dead broke. We were picking bananas on a farm in Australia because they were touring Thailand, doing the usual backpacking thing. They ran out of money. They found that they heard that Australia pays pretty decent wages for agricultural labor. And so they went to Australia to try to save up some money so they can continue backpacking. The farm had a movie night. And the movie they showed was War Dogs. And they thought to themselves, man, these guys are our age. If they could do it, why can't we do it? And so they got obsessed with government contracting. and they taught themselves the entire business. They made a whole bunch of mistakes. It took them a few years to really dial it in.
Right.
But 6 years later, they have a multi-million-dollar business.
Wow.
They ended up specializing not in weapons or ammunition.
Yeah.
They ended up doing laundry services, as I mentioned before.
Right.
But they have a multi-million-dollar business. They're flying all over the world to go inspect their operations in different army bases. You know, they are super grateful. They're like, we just wanted to reach out and say thank you. If it wasn't for the inspiration of War Dogs, we would have never done this.
Right.
And I thought to myself, these guys have taught themselves the business,
Yeah.
which is not an easy thing to do.
Right.
I mean, I learned from Ephraim. Ephraim learned from his
Right.
uncle, you know? I mean, it's not easy to teach yourself this business. It's very complicated. Even some big companies don't want to deal with it, you
Right.
know? So it's not easy to teach yourself. I'm like, and they're as up to date as you can. They have multi-million-dollar active contracts right now. Right. So their information is not outdated. So I said, hey guys, I have hundreds of people asking me to teach them this business. Why don't we do something where we could teach people how to do government contracting?
Yeah.
And that's how we started War Dogs Academy.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so one thing people always ask me, and we've seen comments on like Instagram, whoa, if it's it's such a big money-making thing, why are you teaching anyone else this? You know, why don't you do it all yourself? And they don't understand that the government puts out 30,000 contracts every single day.
Wow.
Every single
Holy
day.
shit.
30,000.
Wow.
You can't even look at it all. You can't even look at the titles of all of them, you know, let alone read them, let alone work on them.
What are some like government contract opportunities that are like interesting that like maybe people wouldn't think of that people are able to fulfill on?
You know, the US government is the single biggest customer in the entire world.
Yeah.
They spend $7 trillion with a T.
Yeah.
Dollars a year.
Yeah.
Right?
Crazy.
It's insane. It's bigger than the vast majority of companies combined.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so they buy everything, right? They buy everything. They have millions of employees that they have to support. They have military bases and diplomatic bases all over the world that they have to support. And all these millions of people who are on the government payroll, they need everything, right? Just like all of us.
Right.
We need clothing and food and entertainment and medical services and laundry services and landscaping services and janitorial services, and so do they. And so they put out everything, literally everything they buy. They're in real estate, they're in fuel, they're in obviously the whole range of military stuff, which nobody else does except for them, but they not just military stuff, they buy everything that civilian companies buy.
Right.
So we've had, I mean, as I mentioned, my partners won laundry services contracts. We've had students win landscaping contracts. We recently had a student win a $2.6 million security services contract.
Wow.
Right. And this was his first the first big contract he won.
Wow.
He'd been doing, he started War Dogs Academy 6 months ago.
Wow.
And he actually didn't win any contracts for like 4 months straight.
Yeah.
And he was about to give up.
Yeah.
And then he won this contract that set him up for life.
Wow.
So yeah, he's super grateful.
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
So you guys teach people how to sort through, find
Exactly.
interesting opportunities, how to apply, how to put deals together.
There is a few different stages of the process. I mean, we have it in video format because we know that people learn it easier that way. But we also have it in PDF format, and we have a whole system set up. So the first part of it is the course, right? That's about 18 hours of video content where you learn the entire system and how to apply and how to register your company with the government, how to apply, how to find out what set-asides are applicable to you. So the government has certain what they call set-asides, like, for example, if you are a veteran, right, or a disabled veteran or a woman, or you live in a environmentally disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged zone, there's different set-asides that they have. Certain contracts are only going to these people.
Gotcha.
So the first process when you set up your company and register with the government, you want to give yourself the biggest chance of winning. You find all the set-asides that you are qualified for. You apply for them. There's different programs. So we go through all that, right? And then we, go through the process of how to find suppliers, how to maximize your chance of success with suppliers, different methods of that, and of course how to fill out the solicitation, which is his own art. But one thing that we found is one of the most important components of War Dogs Academy for the beginning entrepreneur is our community, right? So we don't just have a course, we also have like a forum
Yeah.
where all of our students can go and talk to each other, make business connections, network. But we also have live question and answer sessions once or twice a week.
Yeah.
And we hired a few retired government contracting officers to work for us and to do these sessions. So people who used to work for the government deciding who wins the contracts, now they work for us and they help our students to win contracts.
Sounds like a really interesting thing to explore. There's so many people out there that are trying to figure out what to do to make money.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about e-commerce or social media marketing or content creation, but not really many people are talking about government contracting.
It's shockingly
for the amount of opportunity out there.
For the amount of money that goes through it, I am shocked at how few people know about it.
I'm going to look more into it because you never know what kind of thing you're a specialist in or what kind of connections you might have that you can piece together. A friend of mine got into it wasn't necessarily arms dealing, but he was doing like bulletproof vests and helmets. Sure. And he, funny enough, he was a student in I used to have an e-com education business before I started ZenDrop. He was a student of mine. And the guy, I want to say he made like $40 million.
Wow.
Right when the Ukraine war started, supplying like helmets. And I was like, what are you talking? He's like trying to figure out where to invest and stuff. I'm like, what do you made $40 million on this? I was shocked.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. I think
had a lot of people reaching out to me when the Ukraine war started.
I'm sure,
but I was not
at the time.
Yeah, I wasn't able to.
Yeah.
So that was quite a bunch of opportunities that I did not get to work on.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, and if you do decide to get into government contracting and you want a shortcut, as I mentioned before, we have a B2B offering where we have our staff do all the registration process and all the bidding process for you. And all you have to do is supply the goods or services at a competitive rate that can win the contract, and everything else is done.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, this was an incredible conversation. Probably the most interesting story I've heard in person.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Really cool, being a fan of the movie, to be able to hear your side of it and kind of dive into your world a bit. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing everything
Yeah, my
today.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.